Awesome to see here as Method NA, no girls allowed right out the gate. Get that mass stealth up and head right past that Void Emissary, of course. That does have true sight, so it does see through everything. Trail, you can see, immediately popped his Shadow Meld and is doing a pretty substantial pull, rounding it up and pulling it over into Sky Captain Craig's room. Yeah, and they're not line of sighting any of this at all right now, not just yet, which is something that we usually see teams do. They usually pull things behind that pillar on the right to line of sight everything together, but not doing that and also not using their lust on this fortified pull with 2 Enforcers. I mean, they must be saving it for a bigger pull later on, because this is normally where we see teams pop their Bloodlust in this dungeon. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and we're in a fortified setting right now too, but this is a dungeon that actually all 3 of these dungeons are dungeons that can be quite critical on, because the teams have had so much practice coming in and have seen so many strats from other teams coming in that they've had time to implement into their own, perhaps some of the recent success that No Girls Allowed has found. Not to mention, with the timer that we know from these teams from their time trial and practice runs, 13:30, they gotta pop their first Bloodlust by about 2 minutes 50 seconds into the dungeon, or they're not going to get 2 off, and they're committing to just using 1. No, you're absolutely right with that 14% on the board for No Girls Allowed right now. Bloodlust has come out for Method NA. No Girls Allowed has pulled Sky Captain Craig as well. No Bloodlust for them just yet, as Method NA is 10 seconds into their Bloodlust, 90% on the boss, and 93% on the boss for No Girls Allowed. Finally, the Bloodlust comes out here, especially because they pull some trash on top of it. I like it. I like it too. So we're seeing some efficient cleave here on during phase 1 of Sky Captain Craig from No Girls Allowed right now. Now, I mean, we say we like it, but we're going to have to see where the boss damage is after they're done with this cleave, because, you know, pretty historically this entire weekend, we go over it again and again, this cleave with bosses is something that usually doesn't go well for teams, but we do see both teams are doing the same thing. They're both cleaving with the boss here. But it looks like Method NA pulled the trash kind of a little bit later than No Girls Allowed did. The trash is going to be dead before the Bloodlust runs out on Sky Captain Craig, and they're 20% lower. Yeah, the Sky Captain Craig got healed, I think, oh my God, by one of the trash mobs in there. Wasn't interrupted for the healing bomb coming out of one of the mobs, not the Corsair, I forget the name of it right now, but the healing bomb went out on the boss. Nobody interrupted, and it healed the boss 20%. That is a Tilterino right there to his chat. So 27% for No Girls Allowed. Huge advantage thrown into their half of the court as Method NA tries to make up for their blunder. The trash has been finished off, but they still have an extra 20% to chew through. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's a fortified setting. This boss isn't going to do enough damage to one-shot anyone in the group, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. To be fair, I actually didn't see if it was a healing bomb that healed him or nobody interrupted his revitalizing brew. It was one of the two. We'll have to check it back. I'm sure Teddle saw it, so I might have miscalled what healed him, but he definitely got healed by one of those 2 factors on the trash there. Nonetheless, it has put them at a pretty substantial disadvantage going in now, as No Girls Allowed has finished off the first boss and is getting ready to head over to the wider area and have access to the remaining 3 bosses in, frankly, whichever order they want. Yeah, I mean, regardless of whichever one it was, both of them just require a simple interrupt, and running 3 rogues in a tank that all have low interrupt CDs, there's not a whole lot you can say. Something to mention here is Edelweiss has already procced her staff proc. She's not going to have that for 10 more minutes. The thing is, she could get a proc again at the end of the dungeon, but I don't remember if you actually gain stacks while that debuff is on. I was going to say, I'm not 100% sure on that. We'll have to check in, so I don't want to speak. I'm not sure if you gain stacks while the debuff is down. You just can't proc it. I'm sure some people in Twitch chat know right now, and I don't. We'll have to double check. I'm sure Teddles will look into it, and he'll tell us on the desk later, too. But both teams, 19% trash on the board right now, as Method NA is now stealthing through the top area and getting ready to have their brew drink on the side in order to spawn 2 of the 3 Council of Captain bosses. I believe Eudora is once again out, if I'm not mistaken, Zyro. So No Girls Allowed doing a pretty substantial pull downstairs. There's only 2 grind skills, actually. You can see that they're marked. Want to get rid of those water bolt casts. Pretty heavy damage on the tank, but of course the frontal is the more dangerous one. Yeah, and like you mentioned, after they kill that first boss, we see another death from Yoda on the side of Method NA here. First death of the dungeon, actually, for them. Just random spot death. They just res them up. Fortunately, they weren't in combat. They don't have to commit their battle res to it. But like you mentioned, after you kill Sky Captain Craig, you go to this open section of the dungeon where we see teams do massive pulls, and once again, pulling trash into this boss, which seems kind of dangerous, but you're already cleaving the bosses together, and there's no Eudora, so there's no major single target damage coming out from these bosses here. You know what worries me even more is that Void Touched Emissary in the corner. I mean, that has a pretty large proxy radio. Sestara gets chunked there and just pops his cheat death. Not going to have that for 6 minutes now, but I'm loving this aggression coming out of No Girls Allowed right now. They likely they're keeping an eye on the tournament. They're keeping an eye on Method NA right now on a second monitor. They know they're ahead and they're not taking their foot off the gas. They're just playing their game and they're looking to finish this dungeon off. Now, the efficiency to this boss really is how are you going to play these brews, right? You want to see a nice line of 4, ideally 5, but 4 buffs on the group right now from the buff brews, and of course the bad brews going on the rest of the team.
They reset the boss. They reset the boss. I don't know why they did that. It must have been a complete mistake, but...
somebody went too far.
Somebody went too far, outranged the boss. They completely reset the boss. Any advantage they had is
gone.
It's completely gone now. That's a real buzz.
Tyra, cheer up, man.
They're going to go right into the boss. But I mean, it's great to see the competition coming from NA teams there, and to see such a silly mistake like that, put them behind when they had such an advantage. That sucks to see, man.
That sucks to see. That was a huge advantage that they've completely squandered, as Method NA now is at 70% combined on those 2 bosses, 35% trash. No Girls Allowed is at 33% trash, and just a few percent behind on the bosses. I mean, they've completely squandered that. This boss efficiency, as I was mentioning, comes down to how well you play the brews. The brown swirly on the ground, you'll either have a haste or a crit buff. We all know this. We've seen it before. You want to get, ideally, all 5 members in there taking that buff, and of course, if it's a bad brew, you want to get the bosses in there. Now, sometimes, of course, you are denied by the barrel smash from the main boss. They're starting to get a bit to the side here, Zyra, and it's making me really nervous because these bosses have a very hard reset zone that is technically an invisible rectangle in the area. And if somebody sneaks outside of that area, you saw what happened already.
I mean, it's important to put 2 things together here, right? Like you mentioned, the reason they're on this edge of the room is they're trying to make sure they get nowhere near that Void Emissary you can see on the other side of the room, because they don't want to pull it. Fortunately, like we mentioned also, they don't have Captain Eudora who can randomly jump to one of the 4 corners of the room. If she happened to jump in that corner of the room, they would just have to deal with the Void Emissary, and I'm pretty sure the entire boss platform is in range of that Void Emissary, so at that point, you're committed to killing it, and even if it gets 2 casts off, it could just kill one of the players. The person I'm looking at, it'd probably kill your healer, so this is just kind of a game of inches. You really have to make sure you're keeping it on the edge of the play area, but not resetting the boss like we saw from them.
Inch by inch, Zyre. JB has also, just to have that fact down, procced his staff earlier as well, so neither healer will really have that available, at least to a significant amount for the remainder of the dungeon here. Edelweiss should get access to that before, but it'll be in the very end of the dungeon, likely when they'll be on Harlan Sweete already. Trell has run over and started the RP of the dungeon and grabbed Lightning the pig as well, squeezing that hog good, getting rid of the piggy and waiting for Ludwig von Tortolan, of course, to spawn in the middle. That's a pretty hefty pull right here. Keep in mind there is an Emissary of Tides, and some of these mobs have some pretty annoying casts. I'm not talking just about the Brine scales, but you have you have the gazes going after players. You have the AoE bananas from the monkey ads as well. So a lot of damage coming in if they don't deal with that Emissary quickly.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they don't have any way of dealing with the blind rages here. You see Sistara dropping incredibly low just from that blind rage. I'm pretty sure you can't vanish that off. I'm pretty sure it keeps targeting you even if you vanish. And on top of that, not to mention the tank damage, we haven't really talked too much about how much damage those Tides emissaries do to the tank. They do frost damage. And once again, we talked about this before.
I think that might have been changed for live.
Was it changed for live?
I think it might have been changed. Nonetheless, they hit very hard.
They hit hard on the tanks as well. So there's just a lot of tank damage going off, and it's unmitigated. You can't stun these when that Tides emissary is out. So the fact that he lived through that, even after dropping so low, they're dealing with this trash pack quickly, and they've got Ludwig below half HP. Pretty impressive. They are ahead on trash percentage on Method NA right now, but they're going to pull just slightly ahead when they finish off these 2 low mobs. And they're about 30% ahead on Ludwig as well. So Method NA taking full advantage of that boss reset from No Girls Allowed, but they're still pretty close together nonetheless.
Ludwig is indeed a big chonk boy. A lot of health on that mob, especially in this fortified environment. But, well, good skill display there from Trell to survive that, very nasty pull. Both tanks are decked out in defensive double trinkets. Now we have Urchin, of course, Edict for the 2 tanks in this dungeon. No offense dipping, as we saw earlier with, I believe, Rantari from 40k was running the Goran Custard Butcher's block. But nothing like that from these 2 tanks. They know and respect the danger of the pull. Not sure about this Crusher here, Zyra.
Dilemma got knocked back by the shell, got an aggro radius of the Crusher, and now I don't know if they were planning on pulling this. You usually don't just pull a single Crusher. That's not something you want to do. Looks like they're just going to opt to do another trash pull just so they have something to cleave it with. This might be an on-the-fly call from them. It might not be what they want to do at all, but they kind of have to do it. Otherwise, you're single targeting a large HP Crusher down on Fortified. This is not... I don't think this is planned at all.
This is not planned at all, and Trothak is spawning any moment for them if he already hasn't, just off screen on the bottom left for No Girls Allowed. Method NA already working on Trothak, 65% HP, and it looks like they're just going to cleave this down. No, they're taking it right to Trothak. They know the blunder of what happened here, but they know against a team like Method NA, they don't have the time to waste cleaving down the Crusher and respecting the boss. Dilemma chunking quite low. We got full rows of HOTS running on everybody. You can see it because Edelweiss is targeted right now, so we see the support. Innervate popped here for Edelweiss, which tries to pump Desperate heals into Trell, who's just so unstable. Health is yo-yoing up and down right now as Undead dips low health and finally gets healed up. Looks like they're managing to stabilize right now, but they're not out of the woods just yet until this Quaking pulses and finishes Sistarov, who procced the cheat death earlier. Edelweiss is at the end of her wits right now, doing anything she can to keep them alive. Commits the GCD for a battle res as Sistara reses, and it looks like they've stabilized.
You even see the concentrated flame, the essence proc coming out from Edelweiss to heal herself and the tank instead of using them for damage. That was everything. She was just throwing the entire book at everyone, just making sure she kept everyone out of Grievous range. But they're still dropping low.
They're all at 4 stacks.
They could cloak off the stacks if they wanted to, but they must be saving them for something. You have to use cloak to get those stacks off, man.
I don't know. That was a sketchy situation. They did make it work. Sloppy as all heck right now, but they managed to make it work. They committed a battle res to it. 1 death on the board. Method and A is just having a swell time though here. I mean, they're ahead on trash. They just killed Trothag, who's only still now at 50% health for No Girls Allowed. So what was looking like a brilliant start to the dungeon and just an absolute freebie handed to them for No Girls Allowed, they've completely squandered up until this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough to see, man, because they had such a good strategy coming in, and they're just making silly mistakes, which, I mean, it sucks to see in competition play, but you can see, the potential for this team there. We know that they had the good time in practice. You just kind of have to see them execute it in tournament play. Fortunately, we have 2 dungeons left for them to show that in after this one, but, I mean, barring any massive mistakes from Method and A as well, like that one from JV didn't quite make it up with his wild charge there.
Maybe he found some treasure down there. He's just making sure there's nothing important, and he'll get right back up there as soon as wild charge is up again. But JB just waiting there at the bottom for his wild charge cooldown to come up. Certainly well ahead enough that this won't risk any loss of the dungeon unless something else happens. But No Girls Allowed is behind, obviously, at this point, Zyra. There's no doubt about it. But, not that behind. Like, we're not talking to the level that the King's Rest of Method EU v Abra was. These small mistakes can technically add up, especially if No Girls Allowed has a big pull up their pocket. But here comes the second Bloodlust out of Method A with an absolutely massive pull on top of Harlan Sweete.
Yeah, I think what we're probably going to see out of them at this point is they're just going to use the Cannon Barrage from Harlan Sweete to finish off all of the rest of the trash percentage. That's why they pulled stuff at the start of the boss, because they're planning on using every single one of these Cannon Barrages, especially once the boss gets to 70% and starts hitting everyone with the Cannon Barrages, 60%, and starts hitting everyone with the Cannon Barrages. It'll do enough AoE damage to pretty much finish off all the trash. So, I mean, that's just kind of another new implementation this season. People used it for maybe 1 or 2 trash packs last season, but definitely not to get 30% of their trash.
No. I mean, they're using it a lot. It's V2 of cannons from Noligor at this point. So, well played here by Method and A so far. A bit sloppy, of course. Yoda did proc that cheat death just moments ago at the beginning of the pull, but they've managed to stabilize, and more sloppiness coming out of No Girls Allowed. Unfortunately, Dilemma does fall on his way up to Harlan Sweete's platform, so they're going to have to spend not only the time resing, of course, but just an extra 5 seconds on the board for that one, Zyra.
Yeah, and something else has to be said here too. They're still they know that they messed up, but they didn't mess up massively enough to call this dungeon a complete loss. Method and A can still mess this up. This bomb strategy is not easy to do. We saw multiple times last season. I mean, the thing that I can remember myself is when Leech Boys tried to do it. Revo Fevi sat there tanking everything on top of the boss, waiting for the Cannon Barrage to go off, but they never got one. They got one about 20 seconds later than it could happen. Because Harlan Sweete's a weird boss. It has queuing. It doesn't have a particular set cast rotation, so you don't really know when the Cannon Barrage is going to come off. Fortunately for them, they get it while they have the trash back on them. They're able to finish everything off, or most everything off with it.
Most everything. JB's being tested a bit here, too. I mean, he's 4 stacks on Yoda and Shakib up the whole time right now. Yoda just having a bit of struggles right now, just can't get out of that 4 stack, so JB just on the full defensive, making sure everyone's nice and healthy, full rows of hots all over the place, as Harlan Sweete is now down sub 10%. No, he's taking that double damage as they get one last Harlan shuffle going down right now. 5% trash left on the board for Method and A, but Nerf Tank goes down, and Yoda just at the end of the fight. Fortunately, they do have battle reses available, and the boss did go down too, so it's a bit of a boo-boo, but certainly just not enough for No Girls to catch up. No Girls allowed to catch up.
Well, the Ravager was supposed to kill 3 mobs for them, but only killed 2, so they're going to have to single target this Stormcaller down here to finish off their trash count, but once again, it's not going to be enough for...
No Girls Allowed versus No Buttons Allowed. This could be the last game of the series. Take it away, guys.
Sorry, it's okay. We all have birthday burps once in a while, but here let's go off the bat right away.
Burp, man. It was a cough. I think I still have some of that sickness from London, man. It's still coming back to bite me. I mean, like you mentioned here before, NA kind of set the strategy for this dungeon. They set the bar for all the teams. all the teams pretty much copied their strat. Their strat's so good in this dungeon. They have perfect ways of dealing with all the Tides emissaries here.
They do, and we're going to see just if they're able to repeat that right now as we enter this Raging and Sanguini Cristini affix set here for the dungeon. Of course, we have Tyrannical as well, and Motherlode wasting absolutely no time. Mass stealths all the way to the first boss room right now. Captain Reddick, if I'm not mistaken, but they're Horde in this one, right? Usually, I know Motherlode is a fan of playing Horde. They don't believe there's any substantial advantage for playing Alliance in this one, something that a bunch of other teams have disagreed with, but you know what? They're the forerunner, so...
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit when we saw Siege early on the tournament. Back at the LAN, almost all the teams were playing Alliance because they liked getting all the trash percentage before the first boss. But most of the teams have swapped to a new strategy where, because of the way it works now without reaping, with the new emissaries, you kind of have to do trash later in the dungeon. Also, as Horde, you do get access to that extra trash percentage in form of the Scrimshaw gutters as well. So a lot of teams have opted to play Horde and just not deal with any of the trash at the start of the game.
I'm gonna have to cut you off there because we haven't noted that Trell's actually on his Brewmaster in this dungeon as well.
But we have an extra green class.
We do have an extra green class, so both teams are indeed using Horde. We can see a bunch of Arcane Torrent on the monitor there for cooldowns, but Trell is indeed on the Brewmaster, and not just that, but it's named Trell Siege. So I mean, it must be well practiced for whatever strategy they have with the Brewmaster. Whatever it is, though, Zyro, hopefully it's substantially better than what we saw in the time trials.
Yeah, it's got to be to have any chance of competing with Method today. Like, unless Method and Ace decides to just like stand still for a solid 4 minutes, I don't think No Girls Allowed is going to have a chance. We do see the Bloodlust committed to the first boss here from Method and A. Hasn't been popped for No Girls Allowed yet. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and go with Method and A. They've got the better time trial time here. This seems like a solid strat. It is a tyrannical instance, so the bosses do have more HP, and it's probably just the safer usage of it here. One of the things I'm looking at, though, is, I mean, like we mentioned, the next few trash packs aren't really that difficult, so I don't see what you would save the Bloodlust for. So it makes sense to use it on the boss. Not to mention, on top of that, this first boss does have a damage up as well. Whenever the boss kites into one of those bombs, he does take increased damage for about 6 seconds, so that might be a little extra usage of the Bloodlust too. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, not quite sure. And, you know, interesting to note, I mean, there's a couple of trump cards that they have here. They have the Brewmaster Monk. They have a High Mountain Torn, looks like, for Edelweiss, which has that increased versatility and that kind of front knockdown charge. Edelweiss, more importantly, though, you will notice that there's a little kind of ability in the top near the frame in the form of a leaf. So she's actually running Tree of Life right now versus JB, who isn't. We all know JB is actually not a fan of that ability. So that could be predictive for them making a massive pull somewhere and popping that 3-minute CD and dedicating it to that. They haven't even used the Bloodlust yet, so it probably will be in combination with that. Method and Age is doing what they do best with this dungeon, is chiseling through as the first boss has already fallen for them, and they're pulling a commander pack on the side, making sure to move out of that Sanguini.
Yeah, I mean, just in my mind, thinking about the trash pulls that I've seen Method and A do, they do this relatively large trash pull here, which doesn't seem too difficult, because all I really have to do is focus down the commander and the Wave Shaper. They pull this trash back by itself as well. They then use the spotter to clear all of the trash there. I'm just trying to think in my head where you would commit the Bloodlust. Maybe you could use it on the second boss to try to one-phase. That's the only other usage I'd think of it. But on Tyrannical, I don't think you're going to one-phase that boss.
The problem is wherever they use it, they got to use it quickly. And there's so many places where things can go wrong if you overpile trash because of the Sanguine Affix right now that I'm kind of scared if they're going to combine it with the boss, especially the second boss, which is so immobile unless you don't snare or slow it in any way. So, yeah, I mean, certainly very curious here. A bit of chunk damage coming in on No Girls Allowed as Edelweiss manages to just heal them up through. So start baiting in a bit of that Sanguini, but manages to get out before any damage is done to that Cheat Death cooldown. Method NA now has moved past and has already dealt with some of the spotter damage. You can see it raining down on the ads. We are in a Raging Affix, so key here is not only to be using the spotter for that dropped artillery on the ground, but also to make sure that it is raging, so it gets 100% increased damage on top of it.
And it's important to remember, they can also use that Sanguine to heal up the spotter once it is raging as well, so they don't have to worry about accidentally overkilling it. They are going to kill this spotter off here because the next trash pack that they're going to kill has yet another spotter in it. We'll probably see one of the rogues go by and tag all the gutters. Actually, we see Lighty doing it in this monk here. We'll probably see a rogue stealth by and take care of all the stuff on the left as well. But likely we're going to see them move on and deal with the next trash pack that has the cannoneer in it, and also use that spotter to cleave down all of that trash with the second boss.
Right, you are. Big X here as No Girls Allowed moves in right up to the Enchanted Emissary and immediately starts punting it out of the group. Unfortunately, nobody's interrupted the Wave Shaper. It's taking a bit long. Finally, Trell rains down on their parade and puts a Ring of Peace down to separate the Enchanted Emissary away from the rest of the group. It's making its way back in right now. The rogues are just cleaving themselves themselves to death. Nobody's paying attention to this emissary, and one advantage of Brewmaster is that they are supreme against enchanted emissaries. You just turn your back to them with Rushing Jade Wind, and the rest is taken care of. So I'm not really sure why the positioning was a bit off there, but Trail pretty much can solo those enchanted emissaries. A bit of a dangerous spot for the rogues there, but they managed to squeak by as the second boss here has already been pulled for Method NA. I saw them well practice this boss right now, making sure to move away from them Sanguine piles and doing a bit of tricks with the spotter taunts based on energy levels that we'll see later. But Method NA moving through their first transition phase soon. I believe that Cannoneer, unfortunately, is bathed in that Sanguine pool just a bit, though.
Yeah, just one tick of the Sanguine, not that big of a deal. It doesn't have too much HP, but it will, put off their cannon shot to bring the boss back down, but just a little bit. But they dealt with that spotter pack perfectly. They cleaved everything down with the spotter AoE almost instantly. They cleaved down the Cannoneer before the new mobs even came down for them to cleave, so there was no lost DPS time for them. They've done everything here perfectly. Now, they're going to have to probably go through another phase because doing 70% of this boss's HP when it's on Tyrannical is a little bit unreal, but so far, they're perfect in this dungeon. They're perfect in this dungeon, but No Girls is following suit right now as well. So Star unfortunately gets clipped there, and procs cheat death. That's a bit of a sloppy aggro here off of the bat, but Cannoneer in the trash unfortunately hits Dad as well, procs his cheat death. So a bit of sloppiness coming out of here for No Girls Allowed right now as they struggle to stabilize. Trell, once again, running Undulating Tides, not really a fan of it personally. Running it as a tank, you so frequently dip below 50% HP, so unless he's running it just for an extra safety measure on something like a Monk, but safety or not, doesn't matter. It was already proc dead Azerite trait for 45 seconds, and that death is going to seal the deal for Sistar. Dilemma procs cheat death as well. They don't have another battle res available, but they're trying to commit to kill this boss off with 4 manning it. I mean, this is going to take them forever to kill with 2 DPS. This is a phased boss. They're going to have to deal with at least an entire extra ad phase for sure. Oh, no, I think 2 or 3, quite frankly. Yeah, I mean, at least another one over Method NA anyways. Yeah. Maybe two extra ones with the DPS dead. That was a really questionable death from Troll. He was just standing in where the cannon shot was going to go. I mean, as we know, we've learned recently there's kind of new tech. Everyone always had a little question marks about how that cannon phase works for this boss. It always shoots the middle first. It can place down the circles in any order, but whenever it shoots the cannon shots off, it will always go middle, side. The sides are random, but as long as you're on the side, you know you're not going to get shot first, so you have more time to kind of choose your spot. So that was questionable. He was just standing in it. He could have moved out of it. Zyra, I'm going to disagree with you on that one because I'm pretty sure that whatever side goes down first is the side that gets shot first in that order. I think maybe that was a recent change, which is why you're toting that change. But nonetheless, I mean, we can keep an eye on it here. Doesn't really matter. What does matter is their DPS down. They have 80% to chew through the boss on Tyrannical, and I mean, it's going to be lights out for them with how good Method NA is on this dungeon. I mean, they're the king on this dungeon, so they're already moved past the second boss and well into the village area. You see the sap on the tides coming out from Shakib there, which is exactly what the plan is. Fortunately, he doesn't get hit by the spotter. I saw in practice sometimes if the rogue that was sapping got targeted by a spotter, the tides could come in. Now they're just going to keep it rooted, make sure everything is just out of range of that aura, and they're just going to go ahead and cleave everything down with this spotter here. All they had to do is focus on the Demolisher, the single target damage of the Demolisher, and they should be totally fine. I've got my eye on No Girls Allowed right now. I want to see if I'm right about the cannon shots. I'm pretty sure I'm right. All right, fine, let's place them all. So that's a side, that's a middle, and then that's another side. The side shot first, like the middle shot last. I don't know about that. I'm pretty sure the middle shot first. No way, Zyra. No way, dude. Your eyesight's going. Here we go. Watch. All right. Place them all. Okay, I did shoot the side first. They changed it. Okay, whatever. They changed it. Drinks on me tonight, Zyra. That's how it used to work. Drinks on me tonight. No Girls Allowed. Still trying to chew. Still trying to chew here through the boss as they're dealing with yet another transition phase. This is going to be a very slow kill from them, but at this point they're committed. They have to deal with it. Bloodlust available in 2 minutes 20 seconds for Method NA, something that we know they will use later on. I think the third boss is where they committed. I can't remember exactly, but No Girls Allowed still 30% on the boss. They have at least one more transition phase. Method NA is just piling through this village right now. Yeah, they commit their Bloodlust to cleave on with the 2 emissaries, the Tides, and the 2 commanders after they deal with the rest of the trash with the spotter. So I at least know that. I know some things, all right? And you know what they say, if you don't know something, just make it up and people won't call you out on it, except for you did it. And it's my birthday gift to you. Thank you. I like it. It's perfect. And I mean, the rest of the dungeon here is just masterful usage of the spotter. That's all you got to do. Keep an eye on who gets targeted by the spotter and how stacked everything is. That's all you got to do. Keep things stacked. Make sure you're focusing down the things that can't get hit by the spotters, namely the Demolishers and the Commanders. Those are the 2 things you'll see people actually hitting. And the spotter deals with everything else. As long as you're making sure you get interrupts on raging mobs, See, she keep dropping to 20% from that water spray there. And
Lady goes down. They do have the battle res. Yoda goes down as well. Nerf down to 6%. They managed to struggle through it, though. And then, fortunately, the enraged spotter finishes off that trash before it would finish them off. That was actually very scary. But what, I mean, man, this is like the story of Method and A today. They're just dancing with death so many times, and they managed to somehow, like the coin flip, they're so lucky. Keeps going in their favor every single time. It did manage to, I mean, once again, they kind of eked out the win here over the trash, but that was very close. I mean, Lighty went down, Yoda went down, both battle reses are down. Nerf got down to 6% HP, just a bit more damage, and that was a full team wipe there, and would have given No Girls Allowed the good to go back to get in this match. But here we are again, Method and A still well in the lead.
And here's the question I have. So Yoda dropping also to 9% here, even lower. No cheat death available for him. Fortunately, they're able to heal him back up. But the point I wanted to make, which he almost made for me too, is if they have another death, they don't have a battle res for him. They have to run back, and if it goes on somebody without stealth, they could have a problem coming back. They don't want to drop combat because they want to make sure they keep this spotter alive with the raging affix on him so they can cleave this trash down in Hadal's room. So there's still some danger to this with no battle res and stuff.
No, battle res indeed. Trell just in such heavy staggers, taking advantage of that hot trap from Conflicting and Strife to try and get a bit of damage on the group, but to start getting chunked down, we can see the Tree of Life has already been busted here for Edelweiss as they finally did manage to down that second boss. They actually do have a battle res on the board because that boss took so long. Unfortunately, Demolisher is absolutely bathing in that Sanguini on the side there, so 100% HP back on the Demolisher as Method NA does another substantial dangerous pull here. There are 2 officers in the Gang O mobs right now that are not affected by the spotter, so they're gonna have to be really on top of their game here. Anybody that dies cannot be resident. Everything just starts to spiral out of control, but here's the huge amounts of damage coming in. Perfect CC chain from Lighty, making sure that their leg sweep is applied to the mobs as the spotter rains down the artillery blast.
And there's something to be said about a strategy that you've seen them pull off so many times that it's perfect every time and you know how it's going to happen. Just to have a strategy to that point where they're that good at doing it, it's very awesome to see. Like, these guys have this strategy perfected. Now, like I mentioned before, they're planning on probably pulling these 2 commanders and these 2 Tides emissaries into the boss. They could opt to not do that because, like we've mentioned many times this weekend, they can see this stream. They do have the information available that they're very far ahead in this dungeon, so they could totally just opt to make this safe play and not have to
Nerf goes down!
The tank goes down.
Oh,
no. I mean, this is still dangerous.
It's done. There's no danger to this. There's no way they're killing these raging mobs right now. But Nerf doesn't have a battle res, so he had to release. Lighty released as well, and they're just trying to kite around in circles right now. Fortunately, the emissaries were low enough health that they were able to kill them off as the final commander does a bolstering shout. I don't think anybody has an Arcane Torrent available, so he's going to have that buff for just a bit. But, man, again, Method and A just barely squeezes by. That would have almost been a full team wipe if we had a bit more health on the emissaries of Tides. Here we are, though, 100% they find themselves at. Still haven't used the Bloodlust, and they're just waiting for Nerf and Lighty to quickly run back.
Yeah, that was incredibly dangerous. The only reason I didn't think it was going to be a wipe because they were low enough.
Yeah, no, you called it.
They could have used the cloaks and the riposte to make sure they just barely got through it. But yeah, that was by the skin of their teeth there, man. That should have been a full team wipe, but it was only just the quick-wittedness of them to get through that. I mean, we saw Yoda kiting around at the end there. That was perfect. And like we mentioned, it was just a safer play than pulling it with the boss. If they pulled it with the boss, it would have been a full team wipe.
Zyra, they made that one by a hair. No Girls Allowed now doing the same pull. Quite dangerous on the side here. We saw Method NA almost fail it, but they managed to squeeze through as Method NA is now working on Hadal Dark Fathom, the 3rd boss of the dungeon, making sure to hide from this very, very loud tide coming through, defending themselves with the statue in the middle as they run back and position him. Nerf doing well to point the boss away with that frontal crashing tide right now. Now, trick to that is you can actually stand inside of his hitbox as a tank, just pointing him away, and you will never actually get hit by the crashing tide, so you never really have to move outside of repositioning for those AoEs that go down on the rest of the group. No Girls Allowed now at 72%, looking to finish off their Demolisher. They still haven't done their Hadal room pull, so sorry, we're back in the same boat as we were earlier. We're going to need a full team wipe on Method and A for No Girls Allowed to have any hope of catching them right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is just the trend in this entire series and kind of the difference between the NA teams here, which is kind of unfortunate to see. Method and NA is just a little bit better, or a lot better at most other NA teams, and just teams in general, at execution. Even with that slight wipe there, they were able to, it wasn't even a full team wipe, they managed to keep it to a minimum and not manage to have a full team wipe. Whereas No Girls Allowed, whenever they have their wipes, they're usually something, pretty big, something that's catastrophic enough to put them behind in the dungeon as far as they are right now.
Shakib dedicating his Cloak of Shadows there offensively to live through the wave coming through, just so he can get some extra damage on the boss, as Hadal Dark Fathom gets to 30% for Method and A. No Girls Allowed, still dealing with the rest of the trash from Hadal's room, something that we saw Method and A almost have a disaster with earlier. Tree of Life has been popped for Edelweiss one more time to keep the group nice and healthy, as Trell just starts chunking down so much stagger damage coming in right now on him, and the disease, and the poisons, excuse me, which he helps dispel as Edel just pumps regrowths into the group constantly. They're looking to stabilize right now, but they have their work cut out for them as they actually chunk down. As I say that, Undead actually goes down, and Trell just barely hanging on. Such heavy stagger right now, doesn't manage to get the poison off. 1% health, just pumps another heal in. The battle res did go up on Undead. No, actually it didn't. He released and tried to run back, but Trell goes down, so Star goes down, and it looks like it's going to be a full team wipe. The coin flip did not go in their favor versus Method and A earlier.
I mean, we say it's a coin flip, and I think Jack coined it as that, but I don't really feel like it's a coin flip.
I think it's a super unstable pull.
I mean, that is an unstable pull, but I think Method and A has practiced it enough to the point where they're actually good enough at it to not wipe to it. I mean, I've watched them practice that dungeon many times, and that's not really the point of the dungeon where they wipe that often. They kind of figured out a system to it. Something else I want to mention, I don't think Edel popped Tree of Life before that point. I think that was the first usage we saw of it the entire dungeon.
No, we saw it after the second boss too.
Did we see it there too? Okay, so they pretty much had Tree of Life just for those two big pulls, and it worked for one, it didn't work for the other. And I mean, JB's managed without it, so you kind of have to question that talent choice in play maybe a little bit.
Maybe just a little bit. What we haven't seen out of JB yet either is a staff proc, despite their struggles, or half struggles, I suppose we could say, with the trash earlier. And I know JB's been, I think he's wearing the staff. Let me check right now. He is indeed wearing the staff. All the healers are wearing the staff, so we haven't seen him proc that yet. I know he was playing around with the idea of purposely eating one of these swirlies with bark skin up to try and perfectly calculate a staff proc on the third platform, so we'll see if he ends up committing to that, or if it's just not worth the risk for them because they don't have the battle res. Although if he does, it doesn't matter if they have a battle res anyway. He is their battle res. No Girls Allowed now is committed to pulling the boss. The boss is in the corner of the room and now has been pulled by Trell as he runs out to reset so that all the remaining trash that did not kill runs out and meets them.
Yeah, I mean, getting hit by a swirly to proc your staff is hilarious. That staff it's probably one of the most ridiculous items they've put in the game, but I feel like it's a really weird analogy. Like, for instance, I have it on my Warlock, right? But Warlock it's not easy to spam mana as a Warlock. We haven't really mentioned how the staff really works. Of course, once you get below 10% health or mana, it unleashes all of its charges, doing damage and healing to everyone near you based off of the amount of stacks you have. The ideal solution would be to just use a bunch of mana to proc it, because you're not going to just instantly die, once you're at 10%. But getting hit and dropping below 10% is kind of scary to do, even just for a staff proc.
It is scary, but I mean, it's by now on a dungeon that's taken 18 minutes, you can imagine the immense amount of damage that piles up. It's on the last platform, especially, we were trying to burn down the gripping tentacle if you're ignoring the demolishing, if they go with that strategy. So we'll see if they opt to do that here, as Vikkoth is about to get nuked by the cannon for the second time, taking him down to 27% HP, and the team heads over to the final platform. So we'll see if JB does opt to go with that risky but high reward strategy of proccing the staff on that gripping terror in the back. We can see the rogues are already committing to going back there right now. Bloodlust has finally been popped for the team, and there it is. JB standing in the swirly right now. Let's see if the staff goes off. It did not. Unfortunately, he had just too much absorb or something, so he might have committed his bark skin to that. I'm not sure if he's going to try. He did commit his bark skin to that, and unfortunately did not pay off, so I think they're just going to scrap that and look to finish the gripping.
Yeah, he did drop below 10%, but the staff is kind of weird. If you're only below 10% for less than a GCD, I've found for me, it doesn't actually proc. It looks like he instantly healed back up past 10%, so he didn't have enough time for the staff to realize he was below 10%. It's kind of weird, but it's a little finicky. It's a new item. That being said, Method and A
pretty well. Both Abra and Method and A actually played Atal'Dazar already yesterday. Method and A did have 15 minutes 12, while Abra had 16:05. So Method did have the better time in this dungeon, but Abra, of course, did have time to improve their strategy, so maybe they changed something up.
Yeah, both teams here are starting off with very similar pulls. You actually do see both healers standing on top of those ledges in order for those juggernauts to end up dashing out. A very common strategy that we actually have been seeing from a lot of teams coming into this Atal'Dazar is going left towards Priestess Alunza very early on. You end up shadow melding, and you just end up stealthing all the way towards Priestess Alunza once you do end up getting this 9-pack of mobs down as quickly as possible. You need to make sure that you end up kicking the wildfires and all of the casts from those augurs, otherwise you will end up taking a sizable amount of damage and potentially wiping happening. You actually do see both groups trying to kite it out of Sanguine. Is it a mob mass entangled in the Sanguine? What?
Okay, JB definitely forgot to switch to Typhoon. 100% this was a mistake. JB just wanted to Typhoon them out of Sanguine, but he still has Mass Root selected from a previous dungeon.
From the Siege of Boralus.
Yes, so he just Mass Rooted the mobs in the Sanguine. So this is a huge mistake by JB, forgetting to change the talents. You know how it is sometimes. Mass Root, you barely ever use that talent. You most of the time go with Typhoon. So if you switch it for one dungeon, it definitely happens that you just forget to switch it back. But JB definitely needs some sort of weak aura if you're not in a dungeon to remind him to change this, because this already happened to JB one time, I believe, in the spring season. So this is definitely something you need to keep an eye on for the rest of the dungeon. They will not have this Typhoon available, which is very crucial for something like Sanguine, right?
Yeah, making sure that all the mobs get knocked out of the Sanguine using Ring of Peace or Typhoon or any other ability is super important, just because if the mobs do get stuck in the Sanguine, they'll end up healing for 5% per second whenever they are inside of that Sanguine. You actually do see both teams doing very similar strategies where they're ending up pulling a lot of the trash with Priestess Alunza, and then they are actually kind of cleaving down those golden ads that we actually do see. I know a lot of times you'll end up having like roots or paralysis or blind or something like that for those ads, but we have seen a lot of teams recently just cleaving down like the first ad and then using paralysis on the second Spirit of Gold, like you can actually see on Abracadabra's screen right now.
Yeah, and both of the teams, of course, also using their bloodlust. That's one of the advantages of going this side of the area first, going left up all the way to Priestess, just so we can get a very efficient bloodlust timing and usage on this trash, because we also see a very nice pull here on Abracadabra's side, which is something that Method EU also did yesterday, but they did fail as Gingy grappling hooked into the fire gauntlet. So that's something that Abracadabra saw from Method EU probably, and are doing the same right now, this time without them dying to the fire. So very well done by Abracadabra getting this extra percentage. And it looks like Shakib is doing the very same on Method A side right now.
Yeah, and in addition to that, like you were saying about Bloodlust too, with this dungeon being about a 15-ish minute dungeon, you're only going to be getting 2 uses of Bloodlust. So actually making sure that you're able to get a very strong first use of that Bloodlust is very important. I know last season we actually saw a lot of groups just electing to use Bloodlust on like that 9-pack of trash at the very beginning, which while it's like an okay Bloodlust, is not exactly what you're going to be looking for. So teams innovating this season and going to Priestess Alunza. I know that Shakib ended up doing this weird strategy, similar to what you actually see from Abracadabra here, where they're actually just jumping away. I know Shakib ended up like snapping like a 9-pack of Sarids to their tank from Method NA's run yesterday, so it'll be interesting to see what Abracadabra is doing here though.
Yeah, Abrakeydabra definitely ahead at this point, as they're already doing the snapping pull, as you talked about, with those swords. You see all of them just jumping to this ledge now. The one thing that is really annoying here with the snapping strategy is the Sanguine, of course. The swords have a lot less HP than the Sky Screamers, so you want to make sure you move them earlier, and that's exactly what Divine Field did. So very well done by Divine Field, not getting the Sanguine heal, at least not too much of the healing off on the Sky Streamers, so they did not heal to 100%. Because there's so many pulls on the floor. If only one tick goes off on the Sky Screamers, they will be full healed immediately.
Yep, and so similar pull coming out for Method NA. Again, we gotta point out the fact that JB has forgotten to take Typhoon and is instead using Mass Entangle, because this actually could have gone very poorly for Method NA. Fortunately enough, they actually do get all those Sards killed very quickly, and they actually get that Sky Screamer out of that snap spot with actually incredible precision there, making sure that none of the mobs actually end up healing. You actually do see Dr. J jumping down for the side of Abrakeydabra. He looks like he's distracting Razan in place. You see Divine here with the Dynamancer and those 2 dinosaurs jumping down as well, just trying to make sure that they pull Razan, and they're pulling it close to where you can actually end up pulling those 2 pterodactyls that end up doing their fear. So the most important dinosaur that you actually end up wanting to kill is that orange one, because it does end up doing that charge and then the stun. The Dynamancer 2 can also be kind of dangerous, but it's only dangerous really for your tank.
Yeah, it definitely seems like Abracadabra improved their time, because if I remember last time Abracadabra was playing this dungeon, when they jumped down to Razan at this point, the boss was further into the room, because of course he patrols into around the room. So they definitely are faster this time than they were yesterday. Method NA, they also jumped down, but they still have not engaged the boss at this point. Maybe they didn't get the distract off, because if the boss is in a bad position, you have to wait until he walked all the way around, which is cost you a lot of of time. So maybe they didn't get the distract off because they had some trouble earlier with the trash.
I actually think it comes down to that the slowness on the first pull. And actually, yeah, you do see Nerf end up going down here. But I think the pat on Razan ends up actually coming down to the slowness on that first pack with rooting those mobs inside of that Sanguine. You actually do see some of the mobs from Method NA healing the Sanguine, but it's not going to be too bad. Abrakeydabra here also dropping super low from that Wild Thrash from that one dinosaur, making sure that you end up actually not being in range of it. Plus the Frenzy Charge coming out and stunning one of the people as well. It looks like that dinosaur actually ended up dying underneath Razan, and Razan's actually going to be gaining health here for Abrakeydabra. Oh my goodness. Okay, so the boss actually does get moved out of that Sanguine, but that was not great. That was a pretty big blunder from Abrakeydabra there.
Especially in Tyrannical, you do not want to see the boss healing. Both of the teams making mistakes on this pull where they have the trash on top of the boss. We see a fear also going through on Method and A's side. Thankfully, nothing really happened with the fear going out, but JB also proccing the staff, as you can see. The debuff on the group frames up there, and Yoda not having the cheat death available. So you definitely want to be careful at this point, just because, you know, this Sanguine just means so much. You can see how long both of those teams need to get Restan down, just because in a tyrannical setting, Restan has so much HP. And this is so scary with all those Sanguine pools around the boss, as you can see for both of those teams.
Yeah, Razan actually also does a pretty sizable amount of damage to your tank. They actually buffed the Serrated Teeth dot, which is that physical dot that they end up that Razan ends up putting on your tank. You actually do see Abrakeydabra having a really good Ring of Peace to make sure that that Pterodactyl, that Sky Screamer, does not end up dying beneath Razan. And then you actually see Method NA here pulling in the Emissary of the Tides, getting a leg sweep out on it. Emissary of the Tides is not super dangerous most of the time with bosses because there's like really no protected casts that you normally need to kick and stuff like that. So most of the time you're in good shape, just as long as Nerf is comfortable with tanking Razan plus that Tides together.
Yeah, you see, Method and A are catching up, of course, on the boss DPS, just because of the Sanguine on Abracadabra's side. There's still a difference in percentage when you look at the trash percentage, 75% for Abra, while Method and A is slightly behind on that 69%. Abra also pulled the Emissary off the Tides here on top of the boss, making sure they just get a little bit extra percentage, while, you know, they have to fight the boss anyway. So very efficient pull off the Emissary of Tides here. And again, Method and A catching up. They're on the same percentage, so this is very close between those two teams.
Yep, and you actually having rogues whenever you were actually able to have some of these reanimated guardians or festering sky screamers or emissary of the tides or whatever else you have on Razan also makes your rogues end up do more damage because of keep your wits about you. The trait ends up allowing the rogues to convert some of this AoE to single target damage, so that's very strong for them. Abrakeydabra and Method and A really neck and neck here just because of that Sanguine end up healing the boss. In addition to that, the Sanguine ended up forcing Razan to be further positioned off to the side so that the melee uptime was actually significantly reduced too. So it's just like a bunch of just like minor errors from Abrakeydabra that's going to cost them some of the time and allows Method and A to kind of get back into it. So we're actually seeing similar pulls here coming in from both groups.
Yeah, there's actually a mirror pull coming out from Abra and Method and A. The only difference is that they chose a different side of the pillar. So everything else, the exact same thing. You can also see the root on the tides here, but this Sky Screamer got stunned in the Sanguine pull, so it healed to full HP, and you need to wait until the stun disappears for the Sky Screamer to come out. Definitely not a very good stun, whoever was that. Maybe they were out of interrupts and they had to use the stun, and another shot coming out from one of the rogues here. Again, maybe they're running out of interrupts, having to use the stuns, which is of course not optimal at all if you have those Sanguine pulls on the floor.
Okay, so rogues have rotational stuns with Between the Eyes, so they end up having to use it for damage, but rogues using Between the Eyes there to stun your Sky Screamer inside of Sanguine, that is just like not what you're looking to do.
Worth it.
I mean, I think it ends up happening a lot for most groups, but at the end of the day, for very practiced groups, you should know that you have to hold your Between the Eyes, that you can't be using it right there. Both Method and Abrakeydabra here doing a good job on this trash pack, keeping that enchanted emissary away. Otherwise, it would be reflecting group damage to the whole entire group. Of course, if that actually ends up getting too close to rogues, they may end up accidentally clipping it with their Blade Flurry just because of their increased range and just like instantly dying. I know that we've actually seen clips of that before, but right now Abrakeydabra and Method and A are actually pretty close, with Abrakeydabra being slightly ahead right now though.
I mean, we have to talk about this Typhoon again by JB, unfortunately, because even though the rogues are making the mistakes, of course it's not JB's fault, right? They are stunning them in the Sanguine, so it's the rogue's fault. But JB could be saving, you know, they could recover from those rogue mistakes because it's melee brain after all, right?
Yeah.
So the healer could save them with the Typhoon, but he just does not have it available to him because he still has his mastery from the dungeon earlier. So definitely a huge mistake by not switching this Helen, as Abrakeydabra, they're pretty far ahead at this point. They're about to get rid of those totems here and get into locale space too, while Method NA just engage the boss.
Yeah, this is unfortunately going to be a game of seconds. Abrakeydabra is actually at 100%, while Method NA, unfortunately, is still at 96%. So there's still a little bit more trash that Method NA has to do after Volcall ends up going down before they will end up completing the dungeon. Plus, they do have Yasma from both sides as well. So it would actually take a mistake, I think, from Abrakeydabra here for them to be able to lose it. Like losing a death, a couple deaths on Yasma could be one of those things, or maybe like a full group wipe. But right now, Abrakeydabra is firmly in the driver's seat for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, it happened to them yesterday. Abrakeydabra had 2 spider deaths on the way up to Yasma and on Yasma herself. So if that happens again, they can definitely still lose because this is still close, right? Method NA just having a little bit more single target damage because that's all that matters from now on. You only have Volcall left, and then you have Yasma left. So the more damage you do, the faster you kill the boss, obviously. That's how it works, I heard. Quick math. But Method NA not that far behind.
Yeah, but both of these teams are actually playing pretty well for what it's worth. This is just like it's going to end up being a match of mere seconds, and that's why we end up having to scrutinize some of the stuff like the Typhoon, or we have to scrutinize some of the stuff like healing the between the eye stun inside of the Sanguine. Whenever you are playing a team of Abraceydabra's caliber as Method NA, these few seconds end up mattering, and it's the exact same. And it's going to end up determining like the differentiation between first, second, and third between all of these Titans of West Cup that we have been seeing week in and week out coming in here.
Yeah, most definitely. Especially because, I mean, if you look at the timer, right, Method NA 15:12 is the time they had yesterday when they played this dungeon. And Abra were 1 minute behind on 16:05. Now the thing is though, Method NA, when they played Atal, they were actually playing against Method U, and they lost with their 15:12 timing. Well, Abra won with their 16:05 timing, right? So the seeding definitely matters. Abra getting that first place in time trials just meant that they had an easier way, and even though they were playing a little bit worse, they had worse times in most of the dungeons, they still got up ahead compared to Method NA.
I think Abrakeydabra has also innovated a little bit of their strategy from some of the stuff that they actually saw from Method NA yesterday. Just how you end up snapping like that 4-pack together is actually very smart from what we actually did end up seeing from Method NA yesterday. While it also could be very dangerous, Abrakeydabra just has time to practice that kind of thing with like you said, just a little bit different routing here. Abrakeydabra here waiting for the RP to proc for the stairs to be able to activate for them to be able to make their way up to Yasma. Hopefully not dying to the spiders that are on the stairs like we saw yesterday, but overall, this is still neck and neck here. Method NA sitting at 96%, Abrakeydabra, of course, at 100% trash count as well, and this is going to be a race to the finish, guys.
Did you see Swag just jumping down off the stairs there? I don't know what happened, but he just wanted to go up the stairs one more time. As you see the Bloodlust being popped by Abra here, and Method NA not pulling the boss much slower behind Abra, to be honest, at this point. At this point, if you get a couple of 5 buffs on Method NA, and you don't get any on Abra, then it could still be Method NA that pulls it off here. Even though they do have 1 death, you have to consider the 5 seconds difference, and they also need the 4% trash, but they probably pulled a Skyscreamer, I assume, or something like that to succeed in the back. I'm not really sure what Method NA strategy. Oh yeah, they have the Skyscreamer there in the back.
Oh my goodness, there's the explosive go off. Oh, the fear went off on the whole entire group. You actually might end up seeing some people going down because they end up fear pathing into the spiders. Lighty actually ends up being able to get out of that incredibly quickly too. The explosive plus these 2 Skyscreamers is actually very scary just because of how you actually have to kick the Skyscreamers. So most of the time you're actually not going to be in melee range of Yasma, especially whenever you're dropping that Soul Rend off of them. So this is actually a very incredibly dangerous pull coming in from Method NA because not even the tank will be in melee sometimes. Plus you also do have the cast from Yasma that you have to end up kicking as well. So this is definitely a very dangerous play for Method NA, but if they're actually able to pull it off, then they're in a pretty good spot. But unfortunately, Abrakeydabra is just a little bit further ahead just because of how they ended up dealing with their Sanguine and just how the pulls were just slightly more cleaner. And in this game of seconds, you can't afford to have like minor Sanguine mistakes, especially against teams like Abrakeydabra whenever you're Method NA here.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, you know, they only have 1 death, so it's not a huge deal if you look at the death because it was Nerf tank going down, so they got the rest up immediately. They didn't lose much time because of it at all. But because they had those small things, with, you know, not having the Typhoon, stunning the mobs in the Sanguine and so on, those are very precious seconds that you lose that matter in the end, as we can see right now. I mean, the difference in the boss HP is not a lot. Of course, it is tyrannical, so it's a little bit more than it would be on 45, but still, if they wouldn't have made those small mistakes, they definitely had a much better shot. So Method NA needs to get their head into the game if they want to win against Abra, because they're playing so clean and so well on Abra's side.
Yeah, this is a very good showing from Abrakeydabra. This is the team that the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde analogy that Sweete constantly brings up. Abrakeydabra is either this team that really puts the pedal to the metal and will make teams actually have to work to make sure that they end up securing victories, or at the end of the day, they're just going to throw the game away. And
They didn't even finish the dungeon, so we will have to see if Abra can recover from yesterday's play. I mean, they must be on a high right now because they won their first game, so they have the momentum. Maybe they can just pull this off here, but Method again, they had better times in almost all of the dungeons so far. So Method still has a very good shot at getting a reverse sweep here against Abra.
I think Abra against Paint for Femme yesterday ended up having a bunch of issues towards the very beginning of the instance, like with like tank deaths and then just like having like almost 2 full team wipes, where right here we actually see a huge pull coming in from Abrakeydabra here, whereas Method doing something similar with just a little bit smaller size. Abrakeydabra here, it looks like they have like 4 Peacekeepers. It's either 3 or 4 Peacekeepers with them, making sure that they also continue to kill those explosives off. Otherwise, if they end up going off, that would actually be very dangerous for the whole entire group. Outlaw Rogue, of course, one of the best classes at killing explosives, so it shouldn't be too big of an issue here for them. You actually saw that Thug. It looked like it was actually sapped off to the side, so that was actually very smart from Abrakeydabra.
Yeah, I think, okay, so Method actually having some trouble here. Yoda went down to keep dropping very low. Now the problem is if you have one damage dealer dying, all of a sudden everything crumbles because you need those interrupts, right? You need the interrupts for the assassins, for the thugs. You see Shakib actually proccing his cheat death as well. These are very, very dangerous pulls, especially because of the thugs with their random charges around. You see, Abrakeydabra actually had those wipes because of the thug charges onto Smock. Smock had double charge on him. He went down with an explosive going off, and then Divine Field died because of it, and that's why the whole wipe happened. So they got to be careful to not pull too many of the thugs, and they also got to be careful to make sure they interrupt or soothe off the enrage effect from them.
Do you actually think it would have been worth them to use their battle res on Yoda there whenever he ended up going down? He looked like he elected to just release and run back, but with the battle res available, do you think it would have been a better decision, or do you think like running back is a little bit better for them?
I think it's super scary to not have all of your damage dealers available because of the control that you need on these kind of pulls. So I think Yoda just immediately released without even like thinking about it. But it worked out for them to not use it because he's back and nothing really happened. But it definitely could have been a group wipe just because, you know, they didn't get him back up. They didn't have the rogue interrupts. But it worked out for them here. So they saved the battle res, good on them. And Abrakeydabra is pulling ahead though. They're on 28% trash, while Method still dealing with this trash back on 19%.
Does Method have 5 thugs in that pack?
There's a lot of them.
They're literally they're running around with so many of these thugs. Basically, if they group charge you all at once, you can just instantly die, especially in this fortified setting. Or you get stunned into like a volcano or some ground effect as well. You can just like instantly pop from these thugs if they all end up charging you and stunning you at once. So this is actually a very scary pull for Method where it doesn't feel like it should end up giving you too much of an advantage to be pulling this many thugs at once. Abrakeydabra, of course, is a significant amount ahead in terms of trash count, though.
Yeah, this looks very scary. You saw one charge go on JB, and then the other charge go on Lighty. If this charge that went on Lighty would have went on JB as well, then he would have died. 100% sure. So this is like an RNG super risky pull that Method just did. They are lucky that it's paying off because, again, if you have bad RNG, the same person get hit a couple of times in a row, you're just that. There's nothing you can do about it because those charges cannot be avoided. You see Lighty actually getting dropping very low here as well. One thing that we didn't note yet is that Abrakeydabra playing a triple rogue, while Method is actually playing the Windwalker here.
Yeah, and one of the major benefits for the Windwalker is actually that Ring of Peace with how you're actually able to get some of these mechanized Peacekeepers piloted. So most of the time you end up needing like a knockback or like a Ring of Peace or like a DK grip in order to be able to get some of these Peacekeepers to activate from the mech jockeys, because the mech jockey will end up running to the Peacekeeper robot that's closest to it. And to make sure that the mech jockey is in an appropriate position for it to be appropriately piloted, you do need a knockback occasionally. Most of the time Typhoon is really bad choice for it, but you can do it if you actually end up sapping the mob and then use Typhoon in order to be able to knock it back. But of course that's very dangerous, especially compared to something like a Ring of Peace coming in from Lighty here for Method
You see Snock actually proccing this stuff. You can see the debuff on the group frame, so not available for 10 minutes for Smock, while GB did not proc it yet. You see Abra actually using Stealth and Shroud to go past some of those mobs. You see a lot of CC coming out here. If you look at the back, there's some saps coming out on some of those, on the vendors, to not have too many interrupts going on. Another vendor here intercept as well. You see Ladi going down on Method and A side. They're not committing their battle rest so far. They probably just want to finish it off and get a normal rest out.
Yeah, with just a few seconds left, they may... I wonder if JB is like better off just kind of shadow melding and then trying to single target res in there, or if he's actually going to end up saving that shadow meld for something off later. Because of course JB could have actually dropped combat with that and then just elected to just like normal res Lighty with just like a normal single target res. But it looks like Method NA is kind of positioning in order to be able to get a nice pull, and you actually do see JB there knocking that whole entire pack, and you can actually see that mech jockey running off screen, jumping inside of that Peacekeeper. You actually have to make sure that you tag the mech jockey to where you can actually get double count from the Peacekeeper and the mech jockey that are inside of it. But Method and A here with a pretty good pull there, but Abrakeydabra seems like they're just like so far ahead here, just making sure that they end up chain pulling, whereas Method and A is kind of just taking a little bit more time in between pulls here.
Yeah, it seemed like yesterday Method and A had a really fast strategy as they only needed 18 minutes and 26 seconds. They had 0 deaths as well throughout the whole dungeon, so Method and A definitely struggling a little bit more today than they did yesterday, with already having 2 deaths on their board, while Abra having a clean run again, having 0 deaths, 71% for Abra now, and they still have some Peacekeepers to go. Now, we talked about the trash-heavy dungeon Motherlode already like a million times, but you just gotta understand that the trash after the first boss is so difficult to deal with that most of those teams just choose to do most of their trash before the first boss even.
Yeah, so we saw Method and A's 4 or 5 thug pull, and not to be outmatched, they have now activated 4 of these Peacekeepers all at once, making sure that nobody's standing near nerf, otherwise they're going to end up getting killed by the front the charged claw that will end up actually meleeing nerf whenever the Peacekeeper does end up hitting him, whenever that is active on it. You actually do see 2 of those Peacekeepers finally going down. Abrakeydabra has actually pulled coin-operated Crowd Pummeler and has some of the trash in the boss with it.
Yeah, so they pulled the pack in front of this boss with the boss, so this seems very dangerous as you have an assassin to deal with. You also have the Peacekeeper who just keeps dropping those Historian pools on the floor, as you can see right now. So gotta move constantly. You also have the explosive spawn that you need to deal with at the same time, but they seem to be dealing with it pretty well so far. Now Method and A, I gotta question the huge pulls that Method and A is doing, because it seems like Method and A is basically doing bigger pulls and more riskier pulls than Abra, but because it takes them so much, defensives and whatnot to deal with all of those kind of casts and defucks and all of those interrupts at the same time, it seems like they just slower because of that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think just the setup required for setting up all of these pulls that are for Method and A, while they are flashy and like cool to see, you have to wonder if just like not just like chain pulling like we saw from Abrakeydabra is going to just be a little bit more time efficient. Abrakeydabra of course does have this Peacekeeper here with coin operated Crowd Pummeler, which can actually be kind of scary for your melee DPS, but fortunately enough rogues do have cheat death available to them, so if they were to make a minor blunder in terms of their positioning, they would actually most of the time end up being okay. Method and A here looks like they're actually pulling some trash that you would otherwise get after coin operated Crowd Pummeler. It looks like they're going to be looking to pull it into the boss here in just a couple seconds without Bloodlust available, so this can actually be very scary for nerf.
Yeah, especially because they don't have any battle rests available. We see Shakib actually drop really low, having to use that cloak here to not die to that AoE knockback from the boss that leaves a dot behind damage over time effect. Now Method and A, I believe this is the same pull they did last time around, where they did pull those miners on top. It didn't necessarily give them a super big advantage, but this time around, I mean, Abra seems like they improved their strategy so much from yesterday. I talked about this before, right? They had 12 deaths before they even managed to get to the first boss. Insane struggle last time around for Abra, and this time they cleaned it out. Perfect run here, 0 deaths, 81% trash already. And you can see this pull, we've seen teams struggle to this very pull a lot of times, where they had to kite backwards, because those sappers, if you miss one interrupt, this is crucial, as Dr. J procs his cheat death.
Yeah, and you actually do see JB here kicking those soccer balls into coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, whereas Abrakeydabra here running around, making their way towards Azarok here in just a couple seconds. This Sapper and Earthshaper pull can actually just be super dangerous for your tank, especially if you end up getting a bunch of those casts on him all at once. Fortunately enough, you can actually spell reflect some of those casts back at the mobs, doing a pretty sizable amount of damage to them. And you're actually going to see Abrakeydabra here looking to pop their Shroud and walk all the way up to Azarok, whereas Method and A here is going to be killing coin-operated Crowd Pummeler in just a few more seconds. minions.
Yeah, we've seen some of the teams actually pull the mini boss here, Taskmaster, which we might see from Abra here as well. Okay, so they are going ahead and pulling this with some of the Shale Batters here as well to get the 100% trash before they go to the next boss. Now, this mini boss is actually, it might not be too dangerous when it comes to damage, but it casts cover, as you can see right now. And this cover basically reduces the damage taken by Ascari, damage taken by 70%, and also redirects all damage taken by friendly mobs around him. So once the cover is being cast, you want to drag the rest of the mobs away so they don't get affected by this redirect damage.
Yeah, and you can actually see like all the mobs that are afflicted by the cover. If you actually look and see those 3 like spinning blue shields that are around the mobs, that means that they are affected by the cover and they are entirely too close and that your tank needs to continue to kite them out. Most of the time we don't see teams on live pull Taskmaster very often. Most of the time mini bosses are pretty much skipped almost at all costs just because of how long they do end up taking just for the percent that they do end up giving. But for a pull like that from Abrakeydabra with a bunch of the Shale Biters and the other mobs around Taskmaster Akari, it's actually pretty solid for them. They're going to be killing Taskmaster and they're pretty much done for trash for the instance. They just have Azarok, Rixa, and then Mogul Razdunk here just for the left of them. So they have engaged Azarok. Method in A also has engaged Azarok, both at the exact same time, but it's important to note that there's an 11% trash count difference. Both teams electing to use Bloodlust, making sure that you're running away from those Earth Ragers that do fixate onto you is also a very important part of this fight. You actually did see Divine end up popping his Fear to make sure that the Earth Ragers didn't end up doing their AoE damage that could have actually ended up wiping the group, but both teams here are in very similar spots.
Yeah, so one thing Method in A could end up doing here, which was a very Method in A strategy to do, was that they could pull the mini boss on top of Azarok here, which is something that Method in A invented. Really, they were the first to show this on MDI in the spring cups. They were the ones who pulled Azarok and pulled it on top of the mini boss here and just dealt with both of it at the very same time. Now, in the end, if you do that, you're going to lose boss damage, right? Because you will have to focus the trash a little bit. So they're still going to be a little bit slower if they end up doing that. But it is a very efficient way to deal with this trash here. And we can see it happening right now.
Yeah, and it also, and as always, the Earth Shapers can actually be very dangerous for your tank. So Nerf needs to make sure that he does have that Spell Reflect available, maybe that Shield Wall available whenever the Earth Shapers end up casting into him. Taskmaster Akari and Azarok, of course, needs to be kited around the room whenever that cover is being cast. Something also interesting has been changed about Azarok recently. So basically, before Azarok would only summon 1 Earth Rager at a time once you ended up killing the 4. It has now been changed to summon 2 at a time. So it does require a little bit more attention, especially from these triple melee comps that we've been seeing a lot in the MDI.
So Ladi actually going down here from Method in A. They did have a battle rest, so he immediately got battle rest, but now they're out. So definitely going to be watching out now as Azarok is about to go down, though. They still have the Taskmaster to finish off and the rest of the trash as to get the 100%, while Abra already got the 100%. They're on their way to skip 2 Rixa Flex Flame here. They just have to use their Shadow Meld, making sure they have the proper skip, not have any deaths here, as they still have a very clean run. 0 deaths, 100% trash, only 2 bosses left for them, and obviously they're also going to be able to skip to the last boss with another Shadow Meld at the end after Rixa here.
Yeah, but these are by far the 2 most dangerous bosses. Rixa Flux Flame ends up putting that chemical burn on the 2 closest targets, so you can actually Spell Reflect them, cloak them, or just like use a pretty hefty personal against them, but overall they can actually be very dangerous, especially if they're on your tank while he's getting hit by Rixa. Additionally to that, making sure that you end up dropping all of that stuff on the ground and then using the Propellant Blast to kind of clear out the platform is a very important part of Rixa Flux Flame. And then of course Mogul Razdunk, we've actually seen some deaths from healers. It is the most important thing for Abrakeydabra here to make sure that they stay in the lead, is making sure that Zmok does not end up going down. Method in A, they're making their way towards a very similar point. Shakib ended up getting hit by a mine there and almost ended up going down, but it's going to be okay from them as he was able to actually grapple back onto that train track area.
Yeah, this rope things.
Yeah, I wish I had
that. I wish so as well. Now, Abra is still working on Rixa, as you said, that debuff here, the chemical burn, just being applied. Now, prop warriors can reflect every second, and then of course we also have the ropes. You can completely immune them with cloak, so all you want to do is rotate your defensives basically, and of course it's also dispellable. Now the only reason why you want to have the spell reflect and the immunes is because Smok cannot dispel them both at the very same time, as it has to have a cooldown. So you want to rotate your cooldowns. You want to have spell reflect every second, at least one, and Smok dispelling the other one, and then whenever Divine does not have spell reflect up, you want to use one of Hunter cloaks.
Yeah, and Method NA here doing a very interesting pull with the War Machine and the Technician with Rixa Flux Flame. Of course, these mobs are pretty unconventionally not pulled, so it's very interesting to see Method NA just looking to grab them. I think it just ends up coming to proximity. We actually saw them do this yesterday as well, so being able to do that with Rixa makes for the most efficient pull that you could possibly imagine, whereas Abrakeydabra has already gotten all of their trash count for them. They are looking to Shroud all the way through the instance, and basically for Abrakeydabra, the only way that they end up actually losing this is if ZMOC ends up actually going down, and the reason for that being is because Druid is the only class that Abrakeydabra has available to them that can actually battle res teams. Of course, the Engineering battle res not available on Tournament Realms, unfortunately enough, so ZMOC needs to really make sure that he ends up living.
I mean, we've seen Resto Druids die and them still finishing the boss off with the 3 rogues. So, I mean, in the end, even if Smok dies, there's still a way they can finish it off. The rogues have many utilities available to them, a lot of self-healing, a lot of defensives, so they might be able to survive, but this boss does do a lot of tank damage as well. And if Smok is dead, then this missile that we've just seen go on Smok will go on a rogue. Or an attack. So once it spawns, all the rogues will have to go out of melee range and cut it around. So that will definitely hurt them a lot. But again, at this point, Method NA is still working on Rixa, and you gotta say, they didn't make a lot of mistakes. If you look at their death timer, they did have 3 deaths, but they didn't have any full team wipes. It really just came down to the strategy before the first boss. The trash area where Method NA seemed like they're doing those insane flashy pulls. It's like, oh my god, they pull like 7 thugs, and they pull 5 peacekeepers. But in the end...
7 thugs, oh no, man.
But in the end, Abrakeydabra just being a lot faster and way more efficient at the start. I'm not sure exactly why that was. Maybe, as we talked about earlier, just this whole setup time that it needed for Method NA, doing those flashy pulls just costing them too much time.
I think it was like the setup, the chain pulling from the side of Abrakeydabra, plus the fact that Method NA did have like just peppering in just a couple deaths. I wonder if Abrakeydabra is actually going to tank Mogul Razdunk on that safe spot the whole entire time. For those of you who don't know, there are a few spots on Mogul Razdunk where the Boombas actually don't end up spawning that ground effect. One of them is next to the grates, similar to where they were actually tanking him earlier. And there's like another one off to the far side. It's kind of hard for me to be able to like show you without like any tools, but there are basically a few safe spots on Mogul Razdunk where you don't end up actually getting hit by those Boombas. So I wonder if Abrakeydabra is actually not going to move the boss off of that safe spot. Of course, that is actually very good for melee, and you actually do see Abrakeydabra there finishing that intermission, and now they just have the quick burn on Mogul Razdunk. Once he does end up hitting 0%, there will be like a little goblin that ends up spawning out of the little head, and then once that little mob is killed, it doesn't have too much health, then the fight will actually end. Method NA is finally in the intermission on Mogul Razdunk, but it just does seem a little bit too little too late for them, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for Method NA. I feel like they always have a good showing, but they just always slightly too slow against their opponents, because their opponents always seem to have the best showing against them. It always seems like whenever they play against Method NA, then the teams all of a sudden have those perfect runs. Very unfortunate for Method NA. Abrakeydabra, again, they were struggling before, but against Method NA, just having these clean games and 2-0ing Method NA here.
No trick.
Cup of the summer season here, Method EU versus Abrakeydabra. The gates are about to fall as Shrine of the Storm starts out for both teams. Nagura, last time we saw Method EU at the beginning of this dungeon, they had a lot of problems.
Yeah, we've seen this over and over by Method EU, just doing this snapping pull where they jump in this lantern. We see it one more time here, but this time they actually use a different lantern. So Method EU definitely changed up their strategy, while Abrakeydabra is doing the Method EU strat. So we see Abra doing Method EU, while Method EU actually just copying someone else's strat here. Interesting to see the development over 2 days, basically. And you know what? If it doesn't work out twice for you on Method EU side, then it definitely warrants a mix-up in strategy, as we can see right now.
But I thought 3rd time's the charm, but I guess not in the case of Method EU. Also important to note here, Method EU committed, as usual, their Bloodlust at the top of the stairs here, something that Abrakeydabra has still held on to, and they've cleaned up their pull quite nicely here, just about to hit 10% trash in a moment, probably about 12 with all of the mobs combined. Method EU still having a bit of backpedaling and kiting here from now, just to make sure he's rounding up all of the temple attendants together, because those water bolts are quite damaging and they're quite frequent, so they just don't have access to constant interrupts. You can even see the cooldown at the top of the screen for the 3 rogues and the warrior. Abrakeydabra finishing up and using one of the mass stealths to get down and dirty at the bottom of the stairs, getting ready to aggro Accusir here, and of course punt that enchanted emissary away.
So I actually really like what Abra did here. So they did the whole lantern strategy that Method U did, but they were not pulling all of the trash that we've seen from Method U. They were actually using their CCs, like the rogue blinds, to get some of the CC of the spiritualists from the patrol. So they didn't have those casters to deal with on the lantern. And those are the ones that tend to reset if you do the snapping pull. And that's what Method U was swiping to. So Abra was doing the same pull as Method U, but getting rid of those casters to not have them reset. So I really like this by Abra, as they're already engaging Aqua Seer here, while Method U just now pulled in.
Just now pulling indeed. Smog has procs his Undulating Ties, not available for another 30 seconds or so as they pulled Atal'Dazar. Both teams have actually pulled Atal'Dazar, as we've seen Method EU do prior, and just use it to help cleave on top of the boss, using the power of that haste rune. You can see the rogue sitting in there with Gingy, Mirrors, and of course Frag just getting all that 25% haste to try and catch up to Abra right now. That's just looking like they're having a very solid start. Accuracy here, 75% on the board with 20% trash for them, and Method EU sitting at 19% with just passing 80% on accuracy here.
Yeah, one thing to note as well is that both Method U and Abra already played Shrine yesterday in this cup. So Method U had 21-14, while Abra had 21-58. So Abra was 40 seconds faster, approximately 40 seconds slower. Sorry. So Abra definitely had a chance to mix up their strategy and maybe copy some things from Method U.
But Abra's, you know, they're not maintaining their lead for very long here. We know the single target damage prowess that Method EU has right now, and they've actually pretty much caught Abrakeydabra. Both teams sitting at 55 apiece on accuracy here and should be entering the transition phase here at around the same time. Now we're going to see if they opt to combine any trash with that. The thing is, Abrakeydabra doesn't really have any trash to combine with that. They've killed the pack with the Enchanted Emissary up top. They've killed Atal'Dazar at the bottom, the mini-boss. Method EU does have access to that Arcane Emissary at the top of the stairs, so we'll see if they want to combine that with the boss when it recombines at around 15% once these three Aqualings are dead.
Smog dropping so low, proccing the staff there, and he's also very low on mana. Definitely struggling a little bit here with Atal'Dazar still being alive. Just constantly keep casting this AoE. The Gale Winds, you can see Divine Field dropping very low as well. This might be a problem for them if they don't finish off Atal'Dazar here. Just constantly casting this AoE, and Smog, you know, struggling with mana, struggling with HP.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to have stabilized. They do have just enough break between Atal'Dazar, but they want to keep Atal'Dazar alive as long as possible, just because you want to take advantage of that rune. But, you know, like you're saying, Nagura, at what cost, right? You don't want to have to lose somebody on this fight, especially your Resto Druid. Nobody has a Battle Res after that. Ashine dipping quite low here as well, but they managed to heal him up as Accusir has reculminated in this full form. But Method EU just rocketing ahead. They did pull the Enchanted Emissary pack at the top of the stairs and are combining it with the last few percent of Accusir in order to get the boss down and get some extra cleave percentage, while Abrakeydabra only now is at 8%. So Method U's efficiency and single target DPS has really just surpassed Abra at the moment.
Yeah, one thing to note though is that Abra does have that Bloodlust available. Method U did use it on their very first pull here, so Abra can pull off this huge pull right after this in this hallway here with the next mini boss. And I'm not sure if Method U can do the exact same thing without their Bloodlust, but we'll see.
No, so I mean, I think the corner pack consisting of 4 units is probably not going to get pulled, and I say that actually now does pull it. So they're going to run down and pull everything without Bloodlust. Abrakeydabra is going to do the same pull, and we're expecting to see that Bloodlust start shining up in just a second here as the rest of the mobs go in and start hitting Divine Field. He moves out of the Ironhill Apprentice's AoE, and there finally is the Bloodlust for them as Method U moves out of the Rune Carver Sorn rune on the ground to make sure that none of the mobs are having a 70% damage reduction, but the players, of course, wanting to stand in that instead.
Yeah, you can see all of them just ignoring basically all of the mechanics, because this 70% damage reduction is just a general reduction against everything. So you can ignore the quaking, you can stack up in this rune, you can ignore everything else as long as you stand in there, because the damage that you do take through the 70% reduction is not going to be a big deal for Celia or Smog to heal away. Now, the Bloodlust definitely paying off here. As you can see, Abrakeydabra arrived, they pulled this trash a little bit later, but because of the Bloodlust, they're definitely finishing it faster.
Finishing it faster and safer as well, because Mirrors procced his cheat death on that, so a bit of sloppiness there. Now had dipped quite low. Fortunately, no danger of dying after that. Method EU just slightly ahead on trash, and they have pulled the trash pack just guarding the bridge with the Guardian Elemental is. They've made sure to crowd control with the root after a blind for the Emissary of Tide sitting in the doorway, because there are a few dangerous casters in here, including the one that will heal the group, the Spiritualist. So you want to make sure you're interrupting the Mending Rapids, and you can't do that if that Tide's Emissary is in there, who has now broken free because they have killed off that Spiritualist, and they're going to try to efficiently cleave it down in the group. Abrakeydabra doing the same thing, but once again, it's starting to move just a bit slower.
Yeah, very similar strategies here by Method U and Abrakeydabra, of course. You see the percentage now, Method U just finishing off this trash pack faster again without the Bloodlust. So as I was saying, Abra did the first pull faster, but it took them longer to aggro the next pack. Method U just finished off the first one and immediately pulled the next pack into Zorn, into the mini-boss, while Abrakeydabra just waiting a little bit, just having Zorn by itself, probably waiting for some cooldowns to come back up, and then pick the next pack up. So Abrakeydabra falling a little bit behind.
Disaster here for Method EU. They did not get their skip off on the Guardian Elemental. Zalia's gone down, and it looks like it's going to be a full team wipe here. Fortunately, they have killed the mini-boss as just part of the new meta strategy right now, but that's going to be all she wrote for Method EU on this bridge. They're going to have to try that one again, and unfortunately, they don't have access to most of the Shadow Melds, so they might have to commit killing the Guardian Elemental right now. Abrakeydabra has done their skip properly and is punting the Arcane Emissary away right now as they cleave down the rest of the trash. Abrakeydabra just handed a huge freebie here.
Yeah, this is a huge mistake by Method U because, I mean, yes, Zalia can get back with the Shroud here by the Rogues, but they won't be able, as you said, to skip this mini-boss on the bridge anymore without their Shadow Melts available. So they will have, we saw now, just kite everything backwards, just keep everyone alive because they have to finish this trash now. I'm not sure if they can pull this up because there's so much trash and the mini-boss is still there.
They have to be careful as well because they're backing up into a Void Emissary. You can see the debuff on Frag, and now it just went off. They're backing up into the Void Emissary. Mears gets clipped by it again, so they have nowhere else to run or hide right now as they're trying to deal with the rest of this absolutely abysmal pull. Frag goes down as well. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to finish this off. Abrakeydabra, everything's bright and sunny for them right now as they pulled the remainder of the trash that they needed to on top of the boss and have already gotten started on Brother Ironhull and Gale Caller Faye here.
They were trying to get a Bell Rest off on Frag. We can see it go off right now as Zalia does have time to cast it. I mean, in the end, I think it definitely saved them more time to try and finish off this pull as it's working out for them right now, because instead of just wiping it off and going again, but still, this is just costing them so much time. They still have to work on this. Actually, no, they're waiting for their Shadow Melt now. Okay, so they are going to skip the Elemental that is still in combat with them. They have their Shadow Melt available right now, so they can get it off. So in the end, you know, they made the best of it, but they're still like very far behind compared to Abra, as they're already fighting Brother Ironhull and Gale Caller Faye, 50% on Gale Caller Faye.
So yeah, I mean, the one kind of silver lining here for Method EU by trying to salvage that pull and ultimately salvaging the full team wipe is that they did manage to actually squeeze an extra 2% trash that they likely would have skipped as a result of that bit of a mess that they had. But that's 5 deaths on the board, plus obviously just moving extremely slow to even get to the position on the boss right now that Abrakeydabra are at. Abrakeydabra opting to do a less cleave-friendly strat here and trying to kill off Faye earlier, it looks like, because we do know we're in a tyrannical setting, meaning that you cannot just let all of her casts go through as freely as you could in the fortified setting in the previous season. They do a ton of damage, but as a result of interrupting those, we see all these Gale wins all over the platform right now. So the team kind of has to cut their losses here and get rid of Faye early.
Yeah, we actually saw, I believe it was Method and A who killed Brother Ironhull before they actually finished off Gale Caller Faye, which is something we haven't really seen before, just maximizing the cleave damage as much as possible just to be faster. Even though, of course, we all know that Gale Caller Faye is much more dangerous compared to Brother Ironhull. He doesn't really do much except just frontal and some tank damage, while Gale Caller Faye is the one that casts the Slicing Blast and those tornadoes the whole time, which are very dangerous. And we've seen numerous players die to those tornadoes in the past, even on a fortified setting. So on Tyrannical, you definitely are going to get one shot, unless you're a rogue and you have cheat death.
Well, you're right. Cheat death indeed. Also important to note, Smok had procced a staff a lot earlier right now. He has about 3 minutes left on that staff proc for the Ashara staff later in the dungeon should he need. Now it won't be nearly as powerful by pooling it up the entirety of the dungeon, but something that we do have to note there. Brother Ironhull, 15% for Abrakeydabra as they look to finish off the boss. Gale Caller Faye has indeed already fallen. Now, a lot of hiccup on this dungeon that we've seen so far this season, Nigger, is coming up with the Enforcers and the Ritualists. We've seen a lot of teams have, just Tank Gibbs all of a sudden missed interrupts on the Shadow Bolt volley AoE from the Ritualist. So we'll see exactly what Abra has up their sleeve here in terms of magic tricks, while Method EU still working to chisel away at Ironhull now at 30%.
So one more thing to know, Method, you did use their second Bloodlust just right now. So this means that they're probably going to get 3 bloodlusts in this whole dungeon, while Abra is only going to get 2, as they're saved their first bloodlust for this very trash pull after Aquaseer. So Method EU are going to get 1 more bloodlust usage off. Now, I'm not sure how much it's going to matter, as they're pretty far behind at this point, but Abra doing this huge Enforcer pull, which we've seen Method and A struggle to earlier, where we saw Nerf go down, but Divine Field doing a much better job kiting here, and everyone's staying alive.
Yeah, Divine Field basically front-loaded all of his CDs. He popped his last stand, shield wall, everything at the start. His Spell Reflection just came off CD right now, so he does have that 15% DR available if needed, but the team's doing an excellent job here of helping him kite with the Ursula's Vortex and keeping the mob slowed, but also interrupting the Unending Darkness cast, that Shadow Bolt volley from the Ritualist. So perfectly done here from Abra, as they immediately run through and are getting ready to Shadow Meld all of the trash that just ran through at the base of the bridge here. Method EU has now finished off the second boss and is just having their own struggles right now with the Enforcer group, as a couple of casts did go off of Unending Darkness, which is why the pack was so low, but it looks like they're starting to stabilize as now just gets out of dodge away from those Enforcers, and the team helps clean things up.
You see how scary this pull is, though. Now just tanking all those Enforcers, had to pop the last stand on top of Shield Wall and Iron Bark. So all of the cooldowns basically being popped just to be able to get this, to get the Enforcers gathered up. Once they're gathered up, they can start kiting, and then it's not going to be a huge problem anymore. But the problem is gathering them up. Now actually dropping really low here as he gets hit by the Void Emissary. But now they are going to skip quite ahead, and then they use their Shadow Meld to drop the aggro here.
Yeah, a lot of rattle damage coming in here on the group. The Void Emissary just clipped them. They got a 2 Unending Darkness cast go off. Mirrors dipped really low on the way out there. They managed to skate by with anything that was too drastic once again for Method EU, as they've joined Abrakeydabra on the bridge here, but they're only starting their Tentacle pack right now, as Abrakeydabra has already finished with the Tentacles and is working on the Cultist pack. They'll skip the Enchanted Emissary here with, of course, the Shroud, and they'll move on over into the next room. Now, Mock's going to have his staff available for the next room like we saw JB do, but it's going to, again, I don't think it'll have much charge to it, so I don't know if they can rely on that for the right pack that consists of the Emissary of Tides as well, on top of all the small dwellers.
Yeah, probably not. Just now, the debuff was gone on Smog, as you mentioned, but it might just not be enough. Maybe they have to use some defensive or safe defensives to be able to survive the Lash cast, which of course is not interruptible because of this Emissary of Tides that you can see right here. Now they go in, unfortunately, they get the Quaking as well. Very unfortunate timing. They need to make sure they finish this off very fast to be able, because they can't interrupt those lashes, right? They can't have those AoE stuns go through, but they're doing a really good job finishing it off regardless.
Yep, getting those 5 rolls no problem for the Rogues as they demolish everything in sight just in time for Lord, actually even faster than Lord Stormsong's RP, which is just now ended. So the boss is accessible for Abrakeydabra, is now singing to 88% trash, just the amount they need in this new season because of the rebalancing of percentages for this dungeon. So Abrakeydabra looking nice and mighty right now with Lord Stormsong at 90%, as Method EU has 88% trash, of course, on the board as well, and they haven't even started the boss yet.
Yeah, I mean, Method EU, to be honest, I thought they would be further behind because of this huge mistake that they did earlier, but at this point they're not actually that far behind if you disregard the 5 deaths. Now, of course, with the deaths, 25 seconds, right? But otherwise, they're still very close when it comes to just actual time in the dungeon. Now, one more thing, Method EU are going to have the Bloodlust available, but very late on the boss. Well, Abrakeydabra will get their Bloodlust up right now, so they can use it whenever they want to on the last boss. Well, Method EU are probably just only going to get it at the very end.
Yeah, but we all know everybody saves it for trying to push that Volzith. And now nobody has been able to one-phase it. I think they know that they can't one-phase it either, but nonetheless, they do probably want to get that boss as low as possible. Now, whether they combine it with some eels or the trash as well, again, we'll have to see. We saw, I think, Method and A try to do that earlier, and it was disastrous because the trash reset once they entered the second transition phase. So I'm sure these teams have made note of that and perhaps won't be trying that same strategy. Lord Stormsong here, 35% for Abrakeydabra versus Method EU's 55%. So they're maintaining that 20 to 25% lead over Method EU. I mean, Method EU's got their work cut out for them big time here. Not only do they need to obviously catch up in the first place, but then overcome Abrakeydabra, who's looking stellar right now by at least 25 seconds.
One more thing to mention is the one team that managed to get the boss to 4% before the second intermission phase was Abrakeydabra. They were the one team that had the most single target damage on this last boss. So maybe if they just squeeze out a little bit more damage, they would be able to finish it off. But 4% on a tyrannical boss is still quite a bit, so maybe they're just not going to be able to do it. Now, one more thing to note, if you're just not going to be able to one-face the boss to only get one transition, maybe the Bloodlust usage should be used for something else. Maybe at the very start of the boss where you pull the eels on top of the boss, maybe would be a better usage than later on. I don't know.
I mean, just not use it and teach you a lesson, Nigra. For using their Bloodlust late. Abrakeydabra downs the boss here, about 17% ahead of Method EU's standing when the boss actually flopped over and gets on in the Jellyfish Cove on the pathway to the last boss's room. Volzith, Method EU follows suit right now, waiting for that water to clear from the lightning as they all jump in happily now that there's no damage, and of course will not get hit by any of the jellyfish down there. Nigra.
Yeah, so I would never get hit by that. Actually, never did.
Okay.
Okay, so Abrakeydabra on their way, which we've seen from almost all of the teams so far, was that they pulled 2 of the eel packs on top of the boss, which we're probably going to see from Abrakeydabra here as well. As you can see, Divinefield just charging into the eels and leaping on top of the land here. We see a very bad quaking, but it should be alright for all of them. Now, once they engage the boss, okay, now I actually take it back. Bloodlust, the pull will not be good because, of course, Mock doesn't have the damage buff yet.
Of course.
You don't want to do that.
Certainly don't want that from Smockykins. So Abrakeydabra here on Volzith the Whisper right now, cleaving down those inconsequential eels. Just want to make sure that the tank's in melee range of them, especially when you're kiting them over to the boss, else they will apply their shadow damage to a nearby member, likely the rogue if they're kind of falling asleep at the wheel. But no problem for either team in that regard, as Volzith is now at 80%. So, we talk about that final burn, but it's quite important to get the boss as low as possible, even in the first phase, just to make that second burn good. And I've seen Volzith at 72 and 74% today, pre-transition phase. Abrakeydabra has him at 77 right now, so I don't see them making it in the widen phase after this transition. Method EU, I mean, look, the only way Method EU is winning right now, outside of Abrakeydabra doing a full team wipe, is for them to one phase the boss.
Yeah.
Which I just don't think they can. But, if there's any team that can prove that theory wrong, it would be Method EU.
And they won't have Bloodlust. 2 minutes 30.
Unlucky.
So definitely not going to be able to one phase without the Bloodlust. As I said, just too late. I mean, it's going to be ready before the end of the dungeon, but just too late, right? They're not going to be able to one phase, and therefore they're also not going to win against Abra unless Abra does make mistakes, which still can happen as they're pulling this middle pack here with the denizens. And now we've seen Method make a huge mistake and actually interrupt the boss, drag it on top of those denizens, and then drop the boss pool and almost wiping to it or just losing a lot of time because they actually reset, got another intermission. But Abrakeydabra not interrupting the boss, just dealing with the trash pack by itself. And of course, they need to get all of those interrupts off on the consume magic, because else Mock is going to get one shot with this buff on him.
That he will. 96% trash right now for Abra as they re-engage Volzith. There goes the Bloodlust. All CDs are up. Adrenaline rushes are popped. Avatar is popped. Everything is going, but Smock gets smacked in the face, I believe, by one of the tentacles. This is an absolute potential disaster here. They're going to have to finish off the boss, four-manning it with no healer in sight. Now, this is technically doable, especially because Divinefield is running the Urchin Trinket, so he has some form of throughput in terms of self-sustain from healing. But this is going to be
damage.
Yeah, this is going to be very hard to do. I don't know how he's going to have to survive with the kiting the mob upstairs in his phase and wait for the rogues to finish their kicks, and then they're going to have to go finish the mob, the transition mob for him. So this is going to be very tough here. Method EU hot on their heels right now as they hit 43% HP.
I mean, even if they manage to finish off the boss, look at the amount of damage the healers are doing. They're doing 60k, and this is single target DPS. All of the rogues damage is a little bit skewed because of the eels that they pulled at the very start. So they were doing a lot of AoE, so the damage does not really mean it's all single target damage. Well, Staelia and Smock, they were only doing single target damage. With this buff that they have, the damage increase, 60k DPS missing for Abrakeydabra for the rest of the fight here. Well, Method EU, they're on their second intermission phase. Once they get up, they also have their Bloodlust in 30 seconds. So they will have their Bloodlust to finish up the boss and finish up the trash. I believe this is going to be Method EU, even with the 20 seconds difference still here.
Dude, this is Abrakeydabra right now.
Oh,
I mean,
no.
They're going to have to run in and try to... they might actually get another transition phase without that healer damage once they're done with this one. They still have 29% on a tyrannical boss. This is going to be very hard to do. So much time wasted here as Divinefield needs to keep running around and kiting in circles. He can't go on that mob by himself. He does not have the throughput to deal with it. One of Warrior's weakness, they just don't have much self-healing, so he's relying on his trinket, but the trinket is no charge because he's not getting any damage in the first place. So he has to wait for the rogues to come up and help him finish the ad, which they're now doing, and they're immediately going to go back on the boss. Method EU is already back on the boss. They've popped Bloodlust, they've interrupted, and they're about to finish it off and drag the eels on top of it. So they have a 20-second buffer over this, but this is going to be really tight.
20 seconds, I don't think it's going to be enough. And I don't know, I mean, Smok dying, I'm not sure if it was aggro from the boss, because it definitely can happen, or if it was a tentacle, but such a huge mistake.
Zayli
going down too.
Zayli goes down at the very end of the dungeon. I'm not sure if that was after the timer, so we'll have to see if that technically gets added. But Volzith here, 8% for Abrakeydabra, and time is ticking away. They have 7 seconds, 6 now, and they're just not going to have enough time. I'm not sure if the 5 seconds from Zalia is added or not, but even with that, they still have to deal with the eels and got another transition phase at 2%.
So we're getting ourselves ready for round 2.
Well, can't finish talking, Jack. There we go. But cut off by production. Very unfortunate. As we are in seat here with Method U and Abrakeydabra, we see a shroud coming out of Abra here. We see some mistakes actually happening where the skip didn't work properly, and we saw some of the monks go down, but the skip working out perfectly here for Abra.
Oh, there we go. Okay, Nagura, thank you for reconnecting my microphone. I know you wanted to talk there, but you could have just asked. So here we go. Method EU out the gates indeed with Abra. Now, I mean, this one's for all the marbles for Method EU. They win this match, it's over. They win Cup 1 of the summer season. Abrakeydabra has really just got to shake off that bad feeling that they had after the loss in the previous dungeon and recompose themselves. They know that they had a superior time in time trials to Method EU here. So if anybody can pull it off, it is them. Both teams indeed are Horde. You can see all the arcane torrents at the top of the screen.
Yeah, there's a pretty huge pull that we see here by both of those teams coming out, also dealing with the Emissary of Tides here at the same time as they're done so right now. We see the Marksman, of course, very dangerous mobs to deal with, especially if you have the Emissary of Tides around. Cannot interrupt that Molten Slug, which does do a lot of damage and leaves behind a dot. Method U dealing with this a little bit faster, as you can see, but just slightly.
Both teams replicating a cheat death proc on one of the rogues. Of course, Fragnan's Jimmy on Method EU has procced his, and Ashstein has procced his on Abrakeydabra here as they're looking to pull the boss. Both of them at pretty much the same time. Abrakeydabra just slightly faster, but also 1% trash behind. Bloodlust has been committed at the exact same second for both teams here as they look to kite Sergeant Bainbridge, through the bombs that have littered the battlefield in order to not only do a chunk of damage, but also increase damage taken by 15%. So you got to have a good kiting path here. And Smok just can't shake off the heebie-jeebies from last dungeon and goes down. No battle res available. They've already committed the Bloodlust, so they're going to have to look to try and 4-man this boss.
Yeah, this is a huge mistake by Abra here. Smok just going down there. I'm not completely sure what happened. The boss was already kited into the bomb there, but he got hit by something else right afterwards. So, of course, so much pressure on the healer. And if you just go down at the very end of the dungeon, in Shrine of the Storms, and you lose the dungeon because of that, it's going to be on your mind, right? And now it happened one more time. I do hope that Smok is going to be able to recover, because this is Smok's debut actually this time around, because they used to have a different healer, Alstrad, in the spring season, and Alstrad stepped down, so Smok was replacing him, and he has been doing a really good job so far. We haven't really seen him make any big mistakes, but now we saw this one death in Shrine, and now again just on this boss.
Yeah, nerves may indeed be getting the best of him right now, but Abrakeydabra holding their own and trying to finish off the boss right now. Sergeant Bainbridge hits 20% HP. Method EU wasting no time at full 5-man strength to finish that boss off and get a pull together here right after that. Now getting a pretty significant chunk of damage with the Curse Strike from, of course, some of the mobs in here, the Marauders specifically, wanting to make sure that you kind of get as much mitigation as you can, because it doesn't increase your damage taken by, I think, 15% per stack, something like that. So it leaves the tank quite vulnerable, but they do have low health, so no problem for this powerful Method EU team as they crush the rest of these opponents and move over to the next and final pull before we start with everybody's favorite spotter play.
So we saw the commander go swimming there for Method EU, just taking a swim. And then one more thing that we want to note here is the difference between Alliance and Horde, right? We've seen all of those teams actually play Alliance in the Australian spring final, but now all of those teams switch to Horde after all. And the biggest difference really is the mob difference and the different starting point. Now, one thing that the Horde has an advantage for them is that you actually have those gathers that kind of just die and kill themselves. They're fighting the footman, and if you tag them, which usually the healer does by just jumping in certain corners and using Moonfire and Sunfire to tag them, then you actually get the percentage from them without actually having to kill them at all, because they just killed themselves.
And oh man, Divine Field just dropped to 3% there while you were talking. That's why I kind of shocked out in pain. They really dodged a bullet there. As Abrakeydabra hits 20% on trash, they get ready for their spotter play soon. Something that Method EU is already progressing on right now as they get away from that Enchanted Emissary and finish off the rest of the trash, getting ready to start crossing the water in just a moment. They're cleaving down the spotter now. They don't want to take the spotter with them. There's plenty of other units available across the water and before the second boss, which is why they're just opting to kill that one off, get rid of its Sanguine on the side, and move on. Abrakeydabra doing what they can to claw back, but, you know, in a dungeon like, let's say, oh, I don't know, Atal maybe, right? You know, once this pace is kind of set, it's very hard for these teams at this caliber to mess up, but they're just because the pulls are pretty set, there's not too much creativity, or something like King's Rest even. Here, though, Nagura, especially after the second boss, there's a lot of danger that could be kind of put forward to pull even more into the spotters, and I think Abrakeydabra might need to do some high-risk stuff here.
Yeah, they definitely have to. We also see a Shine go down here, so one more mistake for Abrakeydabra, and those small things definitely matter for them. I mean, the first boss already cost them a lot of time because Smog went down, so they had to play it safe, where everything just took longer. And now we also see a Shine going down, just having to release, having to run back. All of this matters so much. Well, Method EU is already in the second boss. They already dealt with everything. They have the spotter available to them. I'm not sure if they put the spotter into Raging yet, but they are, you know, they are far ahead at this point, and they have 0 deaths as well.
And why is nobody grabbing that cannon? It took so long for Method EU there. I think it was just barraged by, well, cannon barrage there, and it was just completely surrounded. And on one side they had the Sanguini on the ground too, so they couldn't exactly move over to it. So just wasted a few seconds there, but I guess that's just countered by Ashine's death earlier. So 0 deaths on the board for Method EU. Of course, we have the 2 for Abrakeydabra right now as Dread Captain. Lockwood, second boss here in Siege of Boralus, is now sub 70% for Method EU. Now, this boss is on a phase timer here, so, I mean, ideally you just want to skip that last transition phase as best as you can, but you will inevitably probably have 3 of them at this tyrannical level with the gear level that the players have, so Abrakeydabra wasting no time and starting on her as well.
It's one nice shot that we've seen from both of those teams is when they were doing the skip earlier across the bridge, we saw both of the Windwalkers being carried by the Raster Druids back on that stack form, being able to wild charge over because the monks have no way of going over. It's very nice play by both Method EU and Abra, carrying their Windwalkers basically because they're not rogues. So unfortunately, they can't do the grappling hook.
Right. You're not wrong. Windwalkers are not.
Yeah, there we go. I'm very smart. Now, Abrakeydabra is also doing the boss right now, but of course they engaged it way later. So I don't know what they have to do at this point. Maybe something, as you mentioned, they just have to do one of these Hail Mary pulls where they get the spotters and just pull everything up until the next boss.
A lot of the mass time that you save and make in this dungeon that we've seen Method and A do, that we saw Abrakeydabra pretty much copy pasta from Method and A and do, is post second boss, and is using those spotters with a massive pull into the courtyard before the third boss, and then also using that same spotter to kill the third boss's room. We saw how unstable it was. Method and A was able to pull it off with a couple of casualties, and No Girls Allowed was not able to pull it off in the previous dungeon. So that's really where it's going to come down to it for Abrakeydabra to try and make up some time, assuming nothing else goes wrong until that point.
And those are very scary pulls too. We've seen Method and A pull it off perfectly before, but we've never actually seen Method EU do this dungeon before on the cup. We've seen them, of course, do it in time trials and on practice on stream, but they never actually did it in cup play. So I'm not completely sure if they copied Method and A's strategy, which seemed to be like the most perfect strategy we've seen so far, with this huge pull that you can see by Method EU probably right now, and then the second big pull that is going to happen in the next boss room, where you just pull the boss, reset the boss, and you get the whole boss area on top of some of the snipers before as well.
Method EU obviously has finished the boss. I want to say Abra has just now finished the boss. Method EU has already primed one of their big pulls over in the village area, as they've kind of gotten the gunners away from the barrier first. They've rooted the Emissary of Tides, as we see most teams do. We have a skull marked on that Tempest. The Tempest, of course, casts a heal, not a heal, but a silence and a bunch of nasty casts on the tank. So you want to make sure you have access to interrupts and crowd control on that unit, which is why the Emissary of Tides has been rooted in crowd control on the side. Method EU nicely kiting away, not only for the Sanguine, but to get away from those darn bananas that fall on the ground and stun you non-stop.
Yeah, one thing to note as well is that the artillery here from the spotter does not actually damage the Demolisher. It also does not damage the emissaries as far as I'm aware. Unfortunately, the Demolisher and Abra side sitting in that Sanguine for quite a while, healing to full HP. And this is a big problem because no matter how much time you save by the artillery of the spotter dealing with those other mobs, you still have to deal with the Demolisher in the end because it's not going to be damaged. So this is not actually a time gain if you just have it healed to full HP because you can't move on until this Demolisher is dead.
Yeah, I mean, but they might have to. I mean, they're going to have to do something because every small misplay like that, and it just did it again there because it was casting its AoE. The thing is, this is preventable, Nigger. We've talked about this before. You have Typhoon available on Smok, it's not on cooldown. You have Ring of Peace available on Swag, it's not on cooldown. All these mobs that are dying under the Demolisher right now are displaceable, and they are not using them. They see that the mobs are at 3% health. They know that the Crusher can cast one if it's two uninterruptible casts and is therefore immobile. Why would you not pre-punt these mobs out of the way? So just a misplay here from Abrakeydabra that's costing them precious seconds against a Method EU team that is now doing their substantial pull, but Mears goes down here. Of course, they have access to 2 battle reses, but Zaylee does not want to commit the GCD right now because there's just so much damage going into the group currently.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Ring of Peace and Typhoon just such a perfect ability to use, just because the Demolisher, of course, is immune to the knockback, right? So you can knock all the mobs away, and Demolisher is just going to stand there. So just a perfect ability to avoid the Sanguine healing. So just like bad play or not thinking ahead by Abrakeydabra. Also, Method U just getting some of the Sanguine heal here on the Demolisher as well. So both teams having trouble with this Sanguine, just such an annoying affix to deal with. We also see the snipers being pulled by Method U, and they're dropping very low here as the snipers you can just see them and kill them with the spotter, but you need to attack them at the very end to be able to get the percentage, because if they die to the artillery only by the spotter, you do not actually get the count for it.
Indeed, and a bit of a cleaner pull here for Abrakeydabra, finally, what you want to see coming out of them. They've done this pull cleaner than Method EU has right now, so they're just finishing off their Demolisher, but didn't have too much healing, of course, didn't lose anyone in the process, and we finally have a good Zmok out of the way for those mobs from Swag right there, just making sure he does not get an extra healing. Now, the next big pull that we're going to have to focus on is coming up right here. Excellent view from our observers on the Method EU side. They're going to tag the boss, which in turn aggroes the entire room, and this is going to be another difficult one here.
Yeah, most definitely. We see, unfortunately, Abrakeydabra has all those snipers standing this Sanguine. This is a huge problem for them, because those snipers do an insane amount of damage to everyone. They randomly shoot people. There's a lot of damage. You can see a shine dropping very low here. So if they stand in Sanguine, it's going to be a huge problem. But they managed to get them out here, so they should be able to finish them off, and they can line of sight to shoot. So we saw the rogues just go back, and we saw Smok go back, being able to line of sight, so the snipers do not hit them, and they also walk out of Sanguine there. So well done.
Yeah, Zmok was just sitting there mashing his Typhoon key because it had about 5 seconds left on cooldown. The moment it came up, he punted those 2 snipers right out of that Sanguine, but more seconds lost right now as Method U is dealing with the big pull. Shield wall, has come up 4 now. Right now is 5 stacks of the poison. Now, the spotter does not affect the commanders, but that's okay. They do have access to Blood Elves that can get rid of their bolster shield as a result, as long as they kill everything else. Mears goes down again. Fortunately, they do have 1 more battle res, so Method EU a bit of slop here, but manages to squeeze by 1 more time. The majority of the dangerous mobs are dead here. They just have to deal with the double commander pull and get ready to deal with the emissaries that are left over in the room, and they're going to be pretty aggressive here. They're actually going to combine it with the boss and Bloodlust on top of it.
Divine Flame dropping so low, almost going down here. Now, Abra does have 2 battle res available to them. We also saw them struggle again a little bit with Sanguine on both Method U and Abra side, as those commanders, they are also immune to the spotter artillery. So the commanders, they need to be single targeted down. They cannot be killed by the spotter. We see the same thing on Abra's side, that they also engage the boss while still having those commanders up, also popping their Bloodlust here, not saving it for the last boss. But at this point, Method U is already in 75%. On Tyrannical, this boss just takes so long.
Yeah, but there is one thing we have to talk about here, that with how, it's close, you're right. It's not that close, but it's close. Both teams now have 2 deaths on the board, so any advantage that Method EU had there is gone with Mears' double death on the trash before this boss. But Zaylee has popped his staff at this point. We still have staff charged up and ready from Zmaka later in the dungeon, which could play a quite vital role when trying to nuke down the gripping terrors on Vikoth, the final boss. So we'll have to see where they opt to proc it, if they can proc it, because we saw JB in the previous series try to do it and fail to do it, so then they just had a staff that never procced. So we'll see here from Abrakeydabra if they're able to pull that off once they deal with Hadal here, but right now they are indeed still 25% behind on the boss.
Yeah, that can definitely be something crucial, because this stuff just almost one-shooting one of those gripping tentacles will help them so much. Now, again, 30% difference, or 25% difference rather, is quite a lot of HP on a tyrannical Hadal boss, but other than that, this boss is really not difficult at all for those kind of teams. It really just has a lot of HP, and you need to make sure that you do as much single target damage as possible. As you can see, the Raster Druid's trying to switch in and out of cat form to
Sanguine healing on Hadal. You gotta take off, so that's 4% went up on Hadal right there. He was just caught mid-crashing Tides cast, and unfortunately the commander died right under him. There's nothing they could do. They tried to pre-kite him out of it, but that's just part of the danger of kiting mobs with it. Now they're 35% behind on this boss as Method EU rockets even further ahead with their superior single target damage.
The same thing happened to Abra in Atal when they were playing against Method and A earlier. Just having this Sanguine go off on the boss is just so bad on a tyrannical setting. It just costs you so much time, because we talked about how much HP this boss has, so one tick of Sanguine is just gonna lose you so much time, while Method EU is already done with the boss. They're on their way to this last boss. And now in the spring final, when we saw those teams play Siege, we actually had them drag the spotters to this last boss, because those tentacles would actually get damaged by their artillery.
Hey! Congratulations, Twitch chat, you got 65 slot neck.
But yeah, the artillery does not actually damage those tentacles anymore, so therefore the spotters are killed off, and they have to deal with the tentacles by themselves.
Yeah, I mean, yay, the neck level. Adele here at 5% HP for Abra. They're clawing away at him, just trying to catch up as much as they can right now, but Method EU is about to finish their first platform. The gripping terror now sub 20%. Abra just cannot wait to get over there, but they've just dug themselves such a bad hole right now that not even a fully charged staff, I don't think, can really get them out of this hole. So they're going to have to hope for a death on Method EU, which they will not have a battle res for.
Yeah.
But this boss, really not the most dangerous boss in the world. I mean, you know, obviously you can misplay it, get hit by one of the swirlies by accident. Fraggy actually does pop his get there, so a bit of danger coming up. They've left these tentacles a bit too late right now. Finally, one of the cracking hulls does hit the group, which is why they chunked in damage, but they managed to down them before anything gets too far out of hand.
Yeah, so if they do have a death, which can happen on this boss fight, I mean, he said it's not very difficult, which is true, but if you min-max too much, and because how the platforms work is that once you have finished the gripping tentacle, no more demolishers will spawn. But if you try to go on a gripping tentacle, you put all damage onto them, and then you get too many demolishers at the same time, you're just gonna wipe. You're just gonna have deaths, because they need to be tanked. If there's no one in range, they will cast the AoE, which we've seen on the first platform. So if they overdo themselves and they think they can kill off the gripping tentacle before the next demolisher spawns, and then they won't be able to do so, then they're gonna be in trouble.
Abra actually finished that platform a fair bit faster than Method EU there. They did not have the extra Demolishing Terror spawn that almost caused Method EU to lose a member, so a bit of an advantage there. That might be enough. I mean, we'll see exactly. The staff still hasn't procced for Zmok as far as I know. We don't see a debuff on his frame, so that could come into play a bit later, but Method EU is finishing their second platform right now and is rushing over to the third top speed to try and finish off that gripping whilst ignoring the high health Demolition.
Nice view there out of the cannon. S now shoots the cannon shot onto the boss. Now this is the crucial part on the last platform, where you just put all damage out on his gripping tentacle. We see Salia here doing as much damage as possible, while everyone else is nuking this gripping terror. You do not want to kill those demolishers on this last platform. You do need to be fast though, because if you don't kill it fast enough, you're gonna have more demolishers spawning. Oh, we actually saw this spell come out and they just like flew away. They need to get back at the tentacle here as one of the dispels. So this debuff, as you can see on now right now, once it's dispelled, the people that are close to you are actually going to get knocked away, which is what just happened.
And they're trying to stay alive here right now. They got an extra Crushing Tentacle spawn, which Gingy has to off-tank, otherwise Hullcracker will start hitting the entire group right now. They managed to kill it off, and they just have to tank these terrors for a bit longer, and they're going to be able to kind of clinch this win off. Mirza's go down, and we get hits left and right going up as the cannon gets fixed. Everybody's just trying to stay alive here. Zalia goes down too. Fraggy goes down. They managed to finish the match, but they handed an extra 15 seconds
seconds.
over to Abrakeydabra, who's working on the last platform right now. We have just had the staff proc right now. Gripping Terror is about to go down, so they have 10 seconds left. Gripping Terror needs to die here, and they need to wait for the cannon to rebuild and immediately shoot it to try and win this match, but I don't think it'll be enough time as the RP takes too long. And unfortunately, Abra, just too little too late, doesn't
be alive long enough to get that. So Method EU does take that grand final 2-0 against Abrakeydabra. But this also has been the first time we've seen Abra in that grand final spot. So second place finish for them. It's quite good. If we jump over to our points earned here, start seeing where everybody is standing after just this tournament. So what everybody's bringing in. Now again, points have been increased by 50% since last season.